Just understanding that these things are normal. These things are life. It is a roller coaster. You're gonna feel these high highs and low lows, and the higher the highs, probably the lower the lows at the same time. You know, riding through those moments and just knowing that this is the human experience. And
Stars on Mars.
what is that?
It's like a reality. I haven't watched it, so I'm just
Okay.
from what I know from the producer. It's like a reality show, but then it's simulating they're all in a colony on Mars. But I think he was like, I'm done, and he just like left in the middle of it.
I mean, I'm seeing that. So I don't know if you know. I'm
You have a show?
Yeah, I'm hosting this Discovery Channel series right now. So it's like, it's funny. I mean, hosting it, I was seeing a lot of what was going on, but I wasn't seeing all of it.
Yeah.
And so then now watching it.
Yeah.
And I usually watch it a few days after it's out. So people are get like interviewed about like, what do you know, from some reality publication or whatever about like, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what happened. You know what I mean? And then I go back and watch it.
It's just a bunch of stuff happens, and then they cut together. Like the shows have writers.
Yeah,
but they're not writing stuff
this
as
one
it's
is
happening. They write
a
after.
little different because it's like a social experiment. So
Yeah.
it is very, as compared to others, it's less scripted. I've hosted some other things that are a little more.
But I mean, the writers aren't writing the scripts. They write the scripts after, in that they look at all the footage and then they go, "Here's what happened."
True, that's true.
Like here, because you have hundreds of hours of footage. And then you have to pick what you're going to show and what you're not going to show, and how all those things connect together.
True. But you kind of know the big moments, at least when you're out there, like kind of the big beats and all that. But it's still interesting because I heard like, oh, so-and-so had a thing with so-and-so, or like this person was dragging the team down, and you don't really know what that looks like until you see, and you're like, oh yeah. Okay.
Right, because as the host, you're not like in the thing.
I'm there for, on an hour-long episode, I probably appear 4 times.
Right.
So, and I'm in and out for like, I'm at 3 to 5 minutes and then gone, you know, and then it's them.
It must also be weird, you just did this movie, like all the like as the director, you're like this shot, you're having to do, you know how hard it is to get all the shots.
Yeah, right.
So then a reality show, it looks good, but then there's this idea of like, well, how do they get it all? Like, you know, they're the difference between sort of very orchestrated and not orchestrated. I imagine it's a blurred line.
No, totally different though, because like 9 cameras capturing all this different stuff happening at once. And like you said, thousands of hours of footage.
Yeah.
Versus still a lot of takes you got to go through, but it's of the scene that you know you shot and the dialogue you know that's written. And you know what I mean? You kind of know, even when you're shooting it, you kind of mark your faves. You star your takes, and you're like, that's my number 1, that's my number 2, and then when you go back in the edit, you have a pretty good idea of how.
Well, at the very least, you also have in your mind what you want it to look like, and so you're checking it against the directorial vision.
Right.
Like as a writer, you don't. The weird part is you're sitting down and you're making something, and it's just like coming out. But at the same time, you also have this picture in your head of what you want it to be, and so there's this kind of disconnect / like you're trying to take this thing and shape it into what your vision of it is for, and at the same time, you're envisioning something that doesn't exist. So art is kind of mind-blowing in that sense.
Yeah.
Like you had the movie in your head before you made it.
Right.
And then you made it real.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it turns out a lot different than what you envisioned.
Yes.
I think in a good way. I hope in a good way. At least from what I thought it would look and feel like, and what it did. You know, it was the only thing I don't like watching myself up there, because you just
that makes it so much harder.
So critical of everything you do, and you know, and of course, you know, people tell you, oh, you did a good job, you did a good job, and it's like, yeah, you have to tell me that.
Yeah, getting actual feedback in life is so hard. Like the speaking that I do, no one's ever like, you know, like there's people who don't like you and they'll tell you that you suck, right? Like you'll see that randomly on the internet. But very rarely in life are you going to get someone who goes like, not your best work. Or like, you know what you need to stop doing? Like, because everyone just goes, that was amazing. You killed, like when you walk off stage, because nobody likes doing, like everyone is so intimidated by the prospect of doing a thing in front of lots of people.
Right.
That they just want to tell you did a good job. And so how do you get better if you don't hear where you're not doing well?
That's my big thing on just notes generally, whether it's notes on a script or notes on a performance or notes on me as a person.
Yeah.
Just tell me what I can fix. And I appreciate you being gracious and telling me good job, but that doesn't help me.
Yes.
And I'm I would say like I'm a glass half empty kind of person. And it's not that I'm negative, but like I want to fill the glass up.
Sure.
So I don't want to be cool with half a glass. I want the full glass. So what can I do to fill the glass?
Well, yeah, you do. One of the things I always go is I go like, what are your least favorite part? Like, what would you cut? Like, like what didn't do it for you? Like, what did you feel like? And so if you just go, what do you think? People are going to be like, it was great. But if you sort of can specifically nudge them towards what you don't like, I mean, that can be a problem because also sometimes you get notes from people and you realize like either they're not smart enough or they don't care enough to actually have notes, but they think you want notes. So they just like tell you shit. And then you can end up like fixing stuff that's not broken or, they're just, or they don't really understand what you're trying to do. So for you to take their feedback, it doesn't actually get you closer to what you want to do.
Right.
But I think generally nudging people towards disconfirmation versus confirmation is the way you want to do it. Like, what can I do better?
Yeah.
How is the glass half empty instead of full? That's the only way you can get better.
And I love getting a lot of notes from a lot of people because when you get the same note twice or 3 times or 4 times,
if they don't know each other,
it's like, if they don't know each other, it's like, all right, I was so stubborn on this point, and I was like, no, you don't understand, and it's like, all right, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe this is not the best way or the only way. Well,
there's that Stephen King thing about how you have to kill your darlings. Like basically, whatever you love the most is probably the thing you're gonna have to get rid of because it's what you're most biased about. And so when you independently get multiple people telling you like you got to cut like your favorite part, that's the hardest because it means they're probably right and you're probably unless you're like, but that's the only reason I'm doing it. Like you have to know like is this a sort of a self-indulgent like bias thing, or is this the thing that like is this my thing? And so like what's a darling versus what is like integrity? That's a tricky balance.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I guess there were some things in the MVP movie that, especially in posts, but even in the script, that people were like, some people, not everybody, some people were like, I love this scene. And some people were like, can you think of another way to, and it came down to the fact that it was sort of loved and hated. And no one was like meh on it. Yeah. I was like, that's good.
Sure.
I mean, even if they don't like it, at least there's an opinion around it.
Yeah.
And it was just a moment where I felt like there wasn't on our budget, there maybe wasn't another way to nail that point home or to like get people to sort of really pay attention to what's about to happen next, you know, to kind of get, so we ended up sticking with it, and love it or hate it. There's still people that hit me up about this specific scene that are like,
what scene was it?
It's they're at a gun range.
Yeah.
And so
there's no spoilers in this.
Okay. In the military, you don't point a weapon in someone's general direction, especially on a practice range, and unless it's you never point a weapon in someone's general direction unless you intend to pull the trigger and intend to kill that target, basically. Yes. And so in the film, there's a scene where they're at the range and one of the protagonists is down putting up the new target and the other guy's back there. And the whole point is to create a reaction from this person and make them feel something they haven't felt in a very long time, and there was never an intent to harm. And this person is, we believe, to be a good enough shot that the bullets seem a lot closer than they actually are to the person that's getting fired upon. And I can't imagine what it's like to be that person that feels like you're fired upon in that scenario. It probably feels a lot closer than what, you would maybe, what maybe is the reality. And either way, the way that it's, a lot of that scene is through Will's perspective, who's the one being fired at. And so, we feel this, like this fear and all these things that sort of lead to the next part of it's really the tipping point in the film.
When I wrote The Daily Stoic 8 years ago, I had this crazy idea that I would just keep it going. The book was 366 meditations, but I'd write one more every single day and I'd give it away for free as an email. I thought maybe a few people would sign up. Couldn't have even comprehended a future in which 750,000 people would get this email every single day and would for almost a decade. If you want to get the email, if you want to be part of a community that is the largest group of Stoics ever assembled in human history, I'd love for you to join us. You can sign up and get the email totally for free. No spam. You can unsubscribe whenever you want at dailystoic.com/email. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an unhinged scene. Like it's a very dangerous, like not rational thing to do.
Totally.
And so you get why it would be polarizing. But yeah, sometimes it's funny. It's like you as the person doing the thing, hey, I don't have any money to do it this different way, or all these other things depend on it. And so you sometimes get notes from people and you realize like, oh, they're giving me notes because, they don't understand what my budget is, or they don't understand how this works, like where I am in the process. And so one of the rules that I got from someone that was good is like, when someone tells you something's wrong, they're always right, or almost always right. And then when someone tells you how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. Ooh. So when they're like, this scene isn't working, or this page isn't working, they're right. Because like in their opinion, in their experience, it didn't work. But when they're like, what you have to do is cut it, or what you have to do is do it this way, then that's only fixing it specifically for them, or with their limited knowledge of like the craft or whatever. So I go, okay, I'm noting that there was some objections here, and now I'm going to fuck with it and work on it, but I'm not just going to do what they say, right? Because I'm the one that knows how to do it. This is my work, And so that's I think also like ego says like, who are you to tell me what to do? You don't know anything. And then confidence goes, okay, I hear you. I'm going to like put some more time on this, but it may well be that there's nothing to do here.
Right. That's interesting. All right. So from the movie, what would you fix? What do I need? What are my notes?
What would I fix about the movie? I don't know. I
What
really
doesn't work? What doesn't work? The correct answer is nothing.
Right. Well, do you want honest feedback, or do you want me to tell you it was amazing?
Absolutely, I want honest feedback.
But what also the shitty thing is though, like people are like, here's what I would do differently. And you're like, cool, it's done and published. So
totally. I don't know. I love to hear this because there's going to be more. I want to do more. I want to continue to, work in the space. I want to
ask you about that. I could tell it was your first movie.
Okay.
In the sense that like, there's like when you're writing your first book, you're doing it first. There's all the things that you're having to figure out that you've never done before, and so, and with a movie, like every I don't think people always understand. Like like you had to drive to a place, set up locations. Like that shot could have been a whole day. This one 8-second shot could be a whole day. So people don't understand like what goes into movies. Like it took 8 seconds on the screen, but that could have been 8 days of work.
It's true.
But I felt like, and I also sort of know where this would come from. I felt like I couldn't quite get the angst that the athlete was in yet, because I could tell you didn't have the time. Like the vet, you're like, it would suck to be in Afghanistan and Iraq and come home. That's like a hard transition.
Right.
Like the angst of the athlete, especially at the beginning, I was still a little bit like, it's not that I didn't buy it, but I was wondering like where his pain took longer to unfold because it's more on the inside pain,
Right. Yeah, it's not so clear. It's not so clear to just in general knowledge. I mean, even myself, and I played a bit of sports and all that, and I've been around a lot of very successful pro athletes, and so I have a little bit of a different insight because I've just, especially a lot of these football players that. People like Tony Gonzalez, who are in the movie, and he tells a bit of the story.
Him.
He's amazing, dude. But
we did in the other studio, but I texted him before you came in.
Oh, right on. Yeah, and he's he's like one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah.
At his position, at any position, really. But he tells the story in the movie, even. But like the feeling that I'll never be great again, and that even though he's got all the accolades, and financially, he was smart and he did it all right. And he's just one of these people that, he played the game right and first ballot Hall of Famer, and still just felt like empty and I could have done more. I didn't do enough. I'm a failure. What am I now? I'm nothing.
Yeah.
And there's just so many of those stories at various levels. And then there's a lot of these, like the Will Phillips character that, he's a a composite character, a fictional character, but he's based on real people that you never even heard about, you never even knew about, that played for whether it was 3 years or 13 years, and just wasn't the right circumstance. Didn't have, even when you look at someone like Tom Brady, you never know if Drew Bledsoe ever gets hurt or he's not on the right team in the right situation. Like, you never know. It might not have went the same way. Well,
I thought, so it's like his career ending is anticlimactic, right? He's great, and then it's just, he's not playing anymore. It wasn't like he almost died on the field, right?
Right.
So inherently that his ending is anticlimactic makes it hard for the audience to be like, I get where he's feeling. I understood, like, you did it in the scene, you have him trying to go to the game, like, right after he retires.
Right.
And he, like, can't figure it out.
Right.
And, like, so I get that subtext, which is, like, when you have your life all figured out for you, and suddenly you have to go just, like, be a regular person in the world, it's frustrating and weird and overwhelming. But, like, in reality, that would have been a period for him of, like, a year or two of lots of those little things where you're like, I'm not the famous person anymore and nobody wants me anymore. So anyways, my only not note, but like if I was looking at the script or something, I would have said, I think it's essentially the movie is two parallel lives, like from very different circumstances, parallel lives, two people transitioning into reality and struggling with that transition / reentry.
Right.
But the movie hinges on how clear the parallel is. And his parallel is hardest to square with your character because we get your character so immediately. Right. That story's also been told thousands of times in all of his, like half of art is about like veterans struggling with, you know what I mean? So I think that's the challenge of the movie, but that's also the entire premise of the movie, right? So you stick around and you go, oh, they actually have more in common than you think.
But that's a great point, because I think in general, people also it'd be tougher to have empathy for that athlete. You know what I mean? Because you're like, well, he's playing a game for a lot of money and blah, 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 and the fame and the, versus the veteran story. But there was a scene written in the original script that we just couldn't, there's just no way we could shoot. Part of it was budget. Part of it was just, it was already too long. So it's still too long.
Yeah.
It could get trimmed. But he not only drives to that game, can't figure out, where to park, blah, blah, blah. But he's down on the sideline during the game or pregame. And he's like super uncomfortable because he's not in pads and he's not out there. And you get to see these guys, and even the water boy kind of gives him shit. You know what I mean? And it's just like this moment where it's just like, it's so cringy because he wants to be out there, and you can feel he's so awkward standing there watching everybody do what he loves, and he can know, and knowing he'll never do that again, and so.
Well, no. So it's like my note, you had something to address it, but then for whatever reason, you couldn't get it in there. And that's, I always try to be like, I think the more I've done stuff, the more empathetic I am to the constraints that the people were under. And I understand most people were trying to do their best. But that feeling I think is really interesting. I was actually, I was talking to Dante Hightower and he like took a year off and then retired. Like so his retirement was a little bit longer than people think. It was sort of like, will they, won't they? But I was talking to him about like, where does that energy or intensity go, right? Because like to be great at anything, you have to have this sort of almost unhealthy obsession with the thing, right? Like you're an intense person, and that intensity is directed towards learning how to like playing the guitar, or, riding bulls, or playing football, or, war fighting, right? Like to be great at something, it consumes you to an unhealthy degree, right?
Totally.
And then when the outlet for that thing goes away, the intensity is still there, and the single-mindedness and the obsession is still there, but now there's not an outlet for relief for that intensity. And so you would think I'd be, because writing books is hard, that I'd be a lot more happy when I'm not writing one. But it's actually the opposite, because when I'm not doing it, yes, I have more time and things are easier, but I also now have this that doesn't know where to go. And so it actually takes more emotional regulation for me to not be doing the thing than doing the thing.
Do you remember the line right before he starts firing on him at the range?
No, what does he say?
You just described it. Most of my post-traumatic stress is from lack of traumatic stress.
Yes.
And that's that feeling I think that a lot of just people feel that are competitive people, that are successful people, that especially it's something that's competitive and challenging and all of that. Like that stress is comforting.
Well,
chaos.
You've been deliberately subjecting yourself to stress since you were a kid, right? That like to be great at football or writing or acting or what you do, like you have to have been doing that thing for a long time. You don't just go like at 25, like I think I'm going to get into this, right? It's like, it's been your thing. And so when that thing goes away, you either have to find another outlet or it sort of feasts on itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was always obsessed as a kid with sports. I mean, sports were my thing. I wanted to be Joe Montana or Kevin Mitchell. I'm a San Francisco Giants fan. So all the Bay Area teams. Yeah, I grew up in El Cerrito.
Okay. I'm from
Bay.
Sacramento.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I grew up there and from the year I was born in 81, the Niners won the Super Bowl that year and they won it 4 other times until I was 13. And so I was just obsessed with that. I was Joe Montana for Halloween 2 years in a row and this was me. But I never played football until a lot later in life. I played all these other sports.
Right.
And by the time I was in middle school and I maybe had the opportunity, I was afraid of not being good, getting cut, riding the bench, looking stupid, all those things that people that people struggle with at 13, but also people struggle with at 30 or 50 or whatever. It definitely hung with me. I had that regret for a long, long time, all through high school, into my 20s, into the military, and eventually had to quell that. But in a way, I was still preparing for that opportunity in this weird, like childish way. I always knew at some point I was going to try somehow. And it just didn't happen until I was 29, but it did happen.
It's been interesting. I don't know if people totally get this. I think obviously people are like very impressed with Navy SEALs or Green Berets or, sort of soldiers in general. But I don't think you necessarily get that they have in them the same thing that professional athletes have, or anyone who's like elite at their profession. That's the way they see it. That's the way that they train. It's not as well paid or as, public, but like, I've just come to understand like elite performance is elite performance, right? And so like they're operating on similar schedules, similar sort of discipline. It's like when I go to an NFL locker room or when I speak, like I spoke to the Green Berets at Eglin a couple years ago.
7th group.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
those guys are wild.
Yeah. But you're like, oh, these are the same people. Like they actually do have a ton in common because they're extra. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's extra. And that's how they operate.
Part of that is like knowing that your career is going to end pretty quick.
Yeah, that
like
could be
young, you know. I mean, if you make it to 25 in the NFL, it's not old, but that's like a landmark. I mean, 3 years is a typical career, and a lot of people join the military. They might join at 17 and do 4 years, or out at 21.
Yeah,
they did this crazy stuff. And in special operations, obviously, it's typically longer. I did a total of 10 if you count my time in the National Guard.
Yeah,
But yeah, that like you said, I mean, the structure, the uniform, like identifying with that uniform, that means a lot to you and a lot to other people.
They have the same shit on the wall, like the values, you know what I mean? Like they're talking the same. It's the same sort of set of principles and assumptions and like,
Yeah, the camaraderie. I mean, boot camp, training camp, like whatever it is, like you get really close, and these people could be from all walks of life. They usually are.
Yeah.
Very different experiences and beliefs and all that stuff, but you don't really care about that. You just are like, well, that guy would run through a wall for me, so I don't care what he believes. Like I know he'll do that, and so I'll do the same for him.
I wonder if also part of it is the understanding like how many people want the finite amount of spots also contributes to it, right? So there's it's not a paranoia, but there's a sense that like if you don't want it, you're not gonna last very long. Do you know?
That's true too.
Like I spoke at the Naval Academy on Sunday, and it's like you think about who these kids beat out for these spots, right? And then you think about like, and then at the end of it, they're all like, there's how many submarine spots and how many, naval aviation spots and how many, like, if you want to be a captain of a ship, like there's this thing, and a lot of people want that thing. And so there's this, I think, just like an NFL receiver knows, like, hey, like not only is it generally short, but it can be shorter if I take one day off because someone wants people would kill for my job.
Right.
Right. And so there's that kind of like it's the
Mamba mentality, man.
Yeah.
That was Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it really was. I mean, and there's a lot of people in the military like that. I was fortunate enough to spend a bit of time in a unit where we had a lot of freedom to spend our spare time at the range if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just certain guys that were out there. You just thought, man, they got to be overtraining. They're just shooting way too much. They're doing way too much. And it turned out those are the guys that were the best. You know, it just was.
No one's asking them to do it.
No.
But they want to be the best.
They want to be the best.
Yeah.
At everything.
Yeah.
At everything. And you're right. I mean, with the attrition rates being high in both, very high, the higher you go, obviously, the higher the attrition rate, or just the less people that even apply because they've already talked themselves out of, like, there's no way I could do that. Like, I'm not elite.
Or they just fundamentally don't even qualify. Like, you're like already out of the running just from the basic qualifications, which are not easy.
Right. Yeah. And it's wild though, because as you go, at least in my experience, the people, if you lined up all the people in my basic training class had all 18 x-rays, and an 18 x-ray was somebody, I think the program started in about 2003 or so, where they were trying to bolster the special forces ranks. They wanted to add a battalion to each group. So they're like, we got to find some different folks. So we can't just lower the standards and let more people that are already in the Army, come to selection. So let's open it up to the public. If they score high enough on a language aptitude test and ASVAB, and they got to pass their flight physical and all these things. So I was 23 when I joined, and I barely shot a gun. I wasn't around that stuff, but I had some different life experiences. I went some different places in the world, did some different things, and they saw some value in that. So I get this 18 X-ray contract where you go to basic training, airborne school, and then straight into special forces selection after that. So I go to basic, and of the 200 people in my basic training battalion, 145 of us had this special forces contract.
Yeah.
So it's all these people that are trying to make it, and all of a sudden you're thinking like, what are the numbers? What are the odds of this group? And you kind of assess people.
Yeah.
You look at them and you're like, well, that guy's definitely making it, and there's no way that guy's making it. And how many times I was wrong is kind of crazy. I mean, some of the guys I was right, but some of them I was dead wrong. And it was like, that whole don't judge a book by its cover. Like genuinely in this situation, there's something inside of certain people, and whether they ever access it or not, maybe they don't always, but this forced you to. If you really wanted to go there, you had to go to a different place a lot of times, mentally and emotionally and, physically, really. But it was just crazy to think that and to see that. Because even me, when I showed up, I was really unhealthy before that. Like since high school, I didn't play any sports. I didn't really do anything. The first PT test, I did 29 push-ups in 2 minutes and 53 sit-ups and ran 2 miles in like 15:45 or something. Like not the standard.
Yeah.
You are not going to make it.
Yeah.
But in those 14 weeks of basic, I just committed myself, even in basic, to like, I'm just going to do a little bit more than everybody else, and then that just I got addicted to it. And it just, it's by the end of basic, on the PT test, I did like 145 push-ups and 103 sit-ups and ran 2 miles in 11 minutes. Like a different person was there all of a sudden, just 14 weeks. And then that just continued. And there was a certain number of us that just had that mentality, and we kind of, found each other and, went through everything kind of together and kind of carried each other through it.
It is funny. Like there's all these things I think if you're just like a regular person, they seem like so simple that they can't possibly be true, or they seem like cliche, or like you're just too cynical to be like, it's got to be more than that. But like, sort of the growth versus like the fixed mindset. Like if you're a person who can get better, you can get really good. And if you're a person who's like, I am what I am, like that's sort of how you are. And it's weird how you see it kind of play out that way. Like in like, and obviously in sports and in all, like if you're the person who's just always getting better, like there's really no ceiling on that. And if you're the person who like struggles with feedback, who thinks you know how to do shit, who doesn't like being yelled at, like you're kind of stuck. And you can watch like the trajectories seem the same, and then one kind of just deviates from the other really quickly. So I imagine even a lot of the recruiters or those sort of the people in the boot camps, I imagine they're always constantly like they're like just surprised or they just have a lot of trust in the process for the people who follow it. Like the people who commit, like they know how transformative it can be for someone, and the person who won't sort of submit to it and turn themselves over to it, they're like, you might as well quit right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And they've seen the process before, a lot of those guys. So I imagine they're a little more I don't want to say open to it, but they're a little more patient, with it and knowing that people will, so everyone pretty much self-selects in life, you know, like, you get, maybe you got picked for the team, maybe you didn't, but like you're probably capable of next year making that team if you're willing to commit the time and all that and really just, put it in. And I mean, you see that with simple things in life, like, like weight loss is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And people really struggle with it. And we're just so obsessed with immediate results that if I commit to it, I go to the gym and I go all month, 5 days a week, and I'm doing all these things and I gain 2 pounds, like, it doesn't work. And they just quit. And it's just like, dude, no, just stick, just trust it. Like, look at everybody else that does that. It's going to happen. It's just your body's maybe not quite sure what you're trying to do yet. And so it's like trying to figure out what's happening, and eventually it'll click and it'll go. Just stick with it. Just don't quit.
It's so hard when you're young, I think, and when you're inexperienced, because like people say, trust the process. But if you've never experienced a process before, it's hard to trust in a thing. It just seems like somebody's telling you some lie or some, like they're like, oh, go to the gym, you'll lose weight. And you're like, I went to the gym for a month and it didn't work. Like when someone says like, just keep working on that manuscript. And you're like, but I've been working. They've never gotten to the other side, so they don't know, right? But once I imagine for you, like, so you go to basic training, you're not in shape. 14 weeks later, you've made it through, and you're actually, your gains are accelerating. Now, when you go do other stuff that you've never done before, whether it's professional football or college football, professional football, when it's directing a movie, you're like, I'm comfortable starting at zero because I know how quickly, it's possible to get from here to there. You've done it before. And if you don't quit, chances are that process will work for you again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we self-attrit. I don't know if attrit's a word, but we do, more than anything else.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because when I think about the movie thing, I had an interest in it and a passion for it since I was 19, but I didn't really, I came up to LA from San Diego at 19, took some acting classes, but I just mostly partied and, I worked odd jobs, and 4 years later, I'm, pretty depressed and like, I don't feel purposeful and I'm not doing anything that I feel like I make a difference in the world at all. I feel like if I'm gone, I would be missed by my family, but the world would be just fine without me.
Yeah.
So not until I was 34, I guess, finishing my master's degree in advertising, but I knew I wanted to work in film, and I had the opportunity to do an internship at Film 44, which is Peter Berg's production company out in LA. So I went out there and I'm training for this NFL opportunity, but I'm making coffee and answering phones and like, I'm just an unpaid intern and I don't know anything about, and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can, and I guess 5 years later is when I directed MVP. But through that 5 years, it wasn't like MVP was the only thing going on, or I just wanted to make this movie, or, I wanted to do a lot of things, but I did most jobs you can imagine on a set, aside from anything really technical, like I'm not a camera operator and, anything like that. But just learning the whole ins and outs of the business, from the development side, from like taking absolutely nothing to a finished product, like how that process, how that works and how that looks. And then just asking a ton of questions and getting feedback from people and not being afraid to send somebody my really shitty first draft and just let them tear it apart. But somebody that I trust and I know they know what they're doing and all that stuff, because that's just one of those things. But it was the same with football. It was the same with the military. And you're right. If I didn't, it really started for me with probably basic training. And that period of time where I went from A and I finished at B. But
you're like, I did what they said and it worked. And then, so when they're like, you're like, how do I become a college football player? They're like, do this. And then you did that, you know? And then with football, it's like, then you went, you intern, and they're like, this is how this works. And you listened, as opposed to what I think a lot of people do, which is they think that they know, or they don't want to do the stuff that sucks, or they don't think the other people know.
Right.
They're like, you're like, you had a reason to trust the process, and that you underwent a process and it was transformative. But I do feel like it's like there's like some memo that you didn't get, where the memo says like, you can do like one cool thing in your life. And you were like, you know what I mean? Like if someone was just a Green Beret, you're like, oh, that's cool, right? You were like Green Beret, then you played college football at a great school. Then you were like, I'm going to play professional football. And then you're like, I'm going to write, direct, and star in a movie about my life, give or take. Like each one of those things is like years and years of work, and would be, if a person did just one of those things, you'd be like, wow, good for you. And you just like, you're like, no, you can do this, and then you can do this, and then you can do this. There's something very interesting about that to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think, and I say this a lot to people, and they're like, no, don't do that. Don't say that. But it's true for me. I think I maintain, at least early on, a little bit of naivety in certain things. And I'm okay with that. I don't read too much into how hard this thing is or the odds against you and all that, because I'm like, well, what matters most is I'm passionate about it. I'm interested in it, and I want to do this. And I'm literally dying. And you talk about this, you know what I mean? I mean, you are, every second you're just dying.
Sure.
So
why not try?
Why not try? Because I'm just going to die, and I'm going to be 6 feet deep like everybody else. And, you know, to me, like that, I don't know. That's enough for me. That's enough to not do something that I'm not interested in. And I understand it's very different. I don't have a family. I don't have kids I have to look after. Like there's dynamics in life that adjust us a bit, you know, and we have to make some sacrifices. And I make my sacrifices in certain ways, and I've sacrificed other things that I do want. But I also am coming to this belief that you can do both. Like you can do both. It may not be exactly how you mapped it, and it's probably not going to be, because even the things that I've done, like I wasn't planning on being a long snapper. Like that's not a sexy position. I wanted to be a quarterback like Joe Montana or whatever. But I don't. There is a cap in certain ways, you know, from a ability standpoint, physically, a lot of times that I had to like accept. But there's not a cap on I think how like mentally strong we can become, you know, and how that belief in ourselves, and then how we can still contribute to that thing that you love so much. You just got to find, for me, it's finding thankless jobs, you know, and the thing that people aren't willing to do. Like I'm willing to do anything. So if you're not willing to do that, like give that to me. I'll carry that thing. And that's where I'm going to fit in.
I also think maybe the secret to all the things you managed to do is you did find, I wouldn't say it's an end run, but you found an unusual way into all of them. So even first off, you were just saying about how you got into the Green Berets. You had not the traditional way in, right? Like there was this unique circumstance where they're trying to add people. You had a different contract than most people, right? So you did that. And then, you didn't go in football for, first off, if you're just a regular person in their late 20s trying to go to college and to make it on at UT, probably harder to do than if you have also been in an elite physical circumstances like you were in. And then I imagine being a vet, like people were willing to look at it differently than maybe they would have just someone who's like, oh, I spent the last 8 years on the couch, right?
Yeah.
But like,
no, I got to try out, no doubt. I got to try out because of my background. Like,
but you were also trying out, and you were willing to take a position for which I imagine there was less competition than, say, quarterback. Right. And then when you made it when you did this movie, it's not like you wrote this dark period drama or some like weird, you didn't make you made a thing that there is an obvious market for, but not a lot of people can or want to speak to that market, right? And so that was also a way in that I imagine, again, if you had written and tried to sell a $200 million sci-fi epic as your first thing,
right,
people would probably be like, what? You know, like, come back when you've done something, right? And so people who have done a lot of things are also, I find, like Tim Ferriss is a good example of this. They're good at deconstructing the system and then very strategic about the way in, right? Like, someone called this like finding the third door, right? Like they said, like there's the front door of the nightclub, there's the back door of the nightclub, and then there's like the bathroom window. And you kind of find like the window in. Do you know what I mean? Like what is a different way in that's uniquely suited to my skills, my attributes, and by the way, most people are neglecting.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, with the long snapping thing with football, I mean, I honestly didn't even know what a long snapper was when I was going to go to try out for the team.
Yeah.
But I knew, okay, looking at my size, my lack of physical ability, speed, you know, strength, all these things, which I worked on as best as I could. I got the fastest and strongest that Nate could get.
Yeah.
But that's still not that fast and strong as compared to these guys. So it was like, all right, it's going to be I'm going to a safety or slot receiver are the only two positions that really make sense for my size and speed, whatever. So that's what I'm going to try out as. And I ended up trying out as a safety, and I was on the scout team. You know, I'm getting run over at practice every day, but I'm doing everything I can to prepare the team for the game. This is my first year at Texas. Yeah. And, you know, but I always bounce back up, and I was always, you know, volunteering to be a part of any drill or whatever. Yeah. And then, you know, I was able to be a backup on like the kickoff team or the punt block team, but I was still not. They're like, we can't actually trust that he's going to do as good of a job as this other guy, even though, you know, he might do all the right things at practice. He might be going as hard as he can and trying his best. No one will out try Nate.
But this person is better.
Yeah, but this person's just better, and we got to play the better guy.
Yeah.
But that after that first year, it was like I was in the identifying stage. I was like, I have to get on the field. I want to play so bad. I got to play. We were blowing somebody out on Veterans Day, so they put Nate in the game on kickoff coverage. Nowhere near the tackle, but I go down there, and this guy that's trying to block me, I could feel his balance shifting. He was a big guy, and he was a little top heavy, and so I kind of like, you know, threw him, and it was really just displacing his weight into a different direction. But you know, the sideline went nuts. Like I said, the tackle was 30 yards away. I was nowhere near the play. Sure. But I just was like, that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I got to find a way. So then that's when I started long snapping. The starter that year and the backup were both seniors. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this, you know, 2 months, and I'm just going to do it every day. And if my body, for whatever reason, is not responding, and I'm not getting any better, then whatever. But, you know, pretty quickly I started to somewhat I don't even know if I was getting the hang of it, but I was seeing a bit of results, just small results, but I was snapping 100 balls a day and just like obsessed with it. And all the ways I learned to shoot a pistol, which I didn't know how to do, from stance to grip to, you know, front sight post to trigger squeeze, all those things applied to standing over the ball and getting the right grip and the aim point, aim small, miss small, and, you know, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. All these things we learned in the military, they applied. And it just sort of, it's one of those few closed skills on a field where it's just like shooting a free throw. Yeah, the crowd may be different. It might be the first quarter versus 2 seconds left in the game. The situation's different, but it's 15 feet. Yeah. It's the same shot. And it's the same with a long snap. It's 15 yards. It's the same target. It's the same guy standing back there. You got to put it in his right pocket. Or if it's a field goal, it's like you got to put it, you know, right on the holder's chin. And it's the same. And so if I could just focus there, then I could figure this out. And it ended up working. Like
being a quarterback, you probably do need 15 years of you know, on-field audible experience, like in the sense of
totally
throwing things. You need to have run through every kind of play, been in every situation, because it's so you need this intense intuition and sort of fingertip feel for the game and where it's going and what it means that you probably can't pick up in your 20s. But there are other things that are more sort of set skills or repetitive things that maybe you can you can't, if you have a transferable base of knowledge. It's like
Right.
Belichick isn't picking college basketball players and slotting them in as quarterback, but they could work potentially as, a tight end, because it's this one thing you're doing. And if you have all these other things, you can learn the last mile of it, but you can't learn the basic part, the fundamentals necessarily.
Totally. No. And I think maybe that's why ultra running's an old man's game a bit. You know what I mean? Maybe, and I know there's physical aspects to that too. And the body changes in different ways. And, old man strength is a thing in certain aspects and certain movements. But also, like, if you've endured some things in the past, like I haven't done 100 yet, but I went out and did 54 earlier this year. And before that, I did 31 the year before. And I ran my first marathon a few weeks before that. And I'd never really done a distance thing before, but I did long movements in the military. Yeah. And I just I know what that's like to want to quit.
Yeah. And that's really the main skill, is like, can you conquer your ability to want to stop doing a thing?
Right.
The very human desire to stop doing this painful thing. Do you have that muscle, the muscle that says, no, we're going to keep going?
Right.
Seneca's line is, we treat the body rigorously so that it's not disobedient to the mind. And so if you have that muscle, the muscle that can get in a cold plunge, the muscle that can push through, the muscle that can deal with people saying you suck a lot until you don't suck, that's like the ultimate muscle.
It's really crazy what these meat sacks are capable of. I mean, it really is. And it's controlled by this little thing up there, mine's smaller than others, but it's wild. Just that this thing can do that, can just endure and just keep going through all this pain. And I wonder, I always wonder, you probably know more about this than me, a lot more about this, but just like the way these the synapses work, and like the nerves and the pain that we feel, like how much of that is phantom. I mean, I talked to a lot of guys I served with in the military, and I've got to know through the veteran community that are missing limbs, right? And it's like phantom pain is a real thing. So it's like, how much of that is actually phantom pain too? You know, when we're out there, we're like, no, I have my legs and my legs hurt really bad. Well, like, what percentage of that is this actual pain, and what percent of it is in our heads? Certain people feel different levels of that, and they're doing the same thing. And I don't know. It's super interesting to me.
Do you know who Courtney Dauwalter is?
I do. I mean, I don't know. I've never met her, but I know exactly who she is.
No, I interviewed her on the podcast. She was talking about, she calls it like the pain cave. So she's like, when it starts to hurt, I tell myself like I'm entering the pain cave and I want to like see what's back there. Right. Nice. So instead of going like, my body's telling me this is painful, stop, which is obviously why your body does it. But your body, it's like the check engine light, or not the check, the gas light comes on way before the car is actually going to run out of gas, or else there's no purpose for the light. You know what I mean? Right. And so if you can have this sort of almost exploratory mindset of like, oh, I want to know what's on the other side of this. I want to know how far back this goes. I want to know how far I can bend this thing before it breaks. Eventually it's dangerous here, but that's how you end up pushing those limits, and it's sort of self-actualizing. Like if you're like, no, this is my limit, I can't go any further than that. That's like as far as you can go. Right. But if you're like, I wonder how far I can go, you're probably going to go a little bit further.
And I'm gonna, I'm not quoting, but definitely gonna reference a very cliche film in Fight Club, but that scene with the lie on the hand, you know what I mean? And that chemical burn, and like feeling that pain, and just like being with it and like sitting with it, and working through it, and not trying to run from it, and not being afraid of it. Like it definitely, there's value in that. There's a lot of value in that. And just understanding like, okay, well, this is absolutely normal. I'm supposed to be feeling this because look what I'm doing right now. Sure. And this is good because, it means my body's operating properly, and kind of having a different approach to that focus. But that's really interesting about the cave too. I hadn't heard that and hadn't thought of it in that way, but just wanting to really lean into that discomfort and pain more, and be like, okay, let's see if I push, maybe I push a little harder right now, even though I'm feeling more pain than I have. And that's the opposite of what, we want to do. That's what the voice in our head is telling us, to slow down or to stop.
Well, most people are physically capable of running a marathon. Like it's not like this superhuman physical task, right? Like you have enough muscles, you have enough body fat, like you can physically do the thing. It's you just don't think you can do the thing.
Right.
And it's hard to do the thing. So you would stop at some point, right? And then later you'd be like, I feel like I could have kept going, right? And obviously this is one of the functions of training. You run 5 miles a lot of times, or start with 1 mile, and then you run 5 miles a lot of times, then you run 10 miles, then you're pushing, you're training. So you get to the point where, maybe you've never run the marathon before, you've never run 26 whatever miles before you've entered the race. But on that race day, that you don't really need to be uncertain or question until you've gotten past the point of your furthest training. Do you know what I mean? Like can I do this is irrelevant for the first 15 miles if you've done 15 miles before, right? It's really the 10 at the end is really the only leap,
Right.
And so like if you've done hard shit before and you've pushed through, if you've followed processes before, then like, okay, I'm doing this again. I don't know to me, that's always a question. Like how do you know you can do something you've never done before? Right? That's
you don't.
You don't. But if you've done other hard shit, hey, first off, I'm familiar with the general shape of what it is to do hard things.
Right.
And then you also know like, hey, I'm someone who doesn't quit. I'm someone who figures stuff out. I'm someone who asks questions, and you have this, so you don't have certainty that you can do it, but you have the ingredients to do it if it is in fact possible to do.
Right. And that's a big part of the allure for me is I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can. Like the unknown, I love the unknown.
Sure.
It's so interesting. And if I've already done something, like I'm already thinking about this, if I'm able to finish Leadville and I get done, like I wonder if I'll have any desire to ever do that again. And not because it was 100 miles and it's a lot of training and it's hard, but it's like, well, I know I can do that now. So
when we make up new reasons, then it's like, can I place? What can I do a better time?
That's true. But just knowing myself,
yeah.
it may be one time. I don't know. I mean, that's something else I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's so interesting to me. And I've thought about this a lot lately too, about why, because people ask me often, like, why are you so, whether it's the word is obsessed or interested or focused on like these challenges and doing these things that, like you said, maybe is a once in a lifetime thing for a lot of people, like that one thing. And I think a lot of it comes from insecurity.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Feel like you have something to prove?
Yeah, I guess so. And I don't know if that's to myself or to, there's not really a person that I can identify as like the person I'm trying to make be proud of me or whatever.
Did you feel like people were proud of you early in your life or no?
I think sometimes. I mean, I think my folks are both very smart, very accomplished people. They worked really hard. My mom got a PhD in a male-dominated field. One of the first women, she went to Cal Berkeley, and
wow.
My dad is a racehorse veterinarian, and he got his veterinary degree at there's a master's degree at University of Tennessee, and they're just very smart people, and so that's probably why I didn't go to college right away, because it was like I got to do it my way, and I got to find my own path, and I didn't really work that hard in high school, but I also there's nobody, at least in my life, that I was more happy to see sitting in the stands at a game, whether it was Little League or whatever, than my folks. My parents. I wanted to make them proud, absolutely. Yeah. But I don't know if it's like proving something to them or if it's proven to something to 13-year-old Nate that just feels, he's still in there. It's still me.
Yeah.
It's the same guy. I mean, I still have these fears. I'm not like unafraid of all these things. I'm absolutely afraid of all these things, but that's why they're appealing to me. So I don't know, but I wonder if that's it. Cause I think I'm secure in a lot of ways, in like mostly like who I am and, what I believe. And I think my willingness to really listen to other people's perspective and way of doing things. I'm very open to that. I like to learn and take everything into account. Like I love different perspectives. but at the same time, like I'm still obsessed, I guess, with like finding this next thing. And I just want to go do this. And these things sort of come about. They're not things I never thought when I was a kid that I'd be running 100 miles. I never thought I was going to join the military either, though. That wasn't really something. The only thing that was a kid dream was professional sports, playing football.
Did you feel like when you did those things, did it feel good for a minute, or is your mind always on to the next thing?
No, it feels good for more than a minute. It definitely does. I mean, I got to play in one NFL game, and I got cut, and it is what it is. I did everything I could on the field. I actually played well, but it was the next big round of cuts in the preseason in 2015, and that was it. And it certainly wasn't like this. That was cool and that was great, but what's next? It was, I spent the next year trying to get another shot, and I had a few teams interested. It didn't happen, and that was it. But I still always think about that, and I'm grateful of that. And it's one of my proudest moments getting to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I finish something, I think, I don't know. That's actually a really good question. I think sometimes maybe, yeah. Sometimes I am sort of like thinking about what's next. I do struggle with enjoying these moments, enjoying life. I have to constantly remind myself to look up if I'm going on a long run, because I'm just like trying to do the best that I can and, just push through things. And I'm like focused down, like just one step, next step, which helps me get to that place. But to actually enjoy what I'm doing and what I'm seeing and experiencing and the opportunity to do that and to try, I miss out on that a lot, and I fail to do that.
We might have overlapped very briefly when you were in Seattle, because I went to one Seattle training camp and I met with Coach Carroll and John Schneider. Mm-hmm. I just don't remember if it was 2015 or 2016. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember if it's the season after they lost the Super Bowl or the season after that.
That's when I was there. It's kind of funny.
1 year after or 2 years after?
1 year after. The year I went to Texas was the year after they lost to Alabama in the national championship game. Okay. And the year I went to the Seahawks was the year after they lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So, and I did not fix what was broken.
Well, what had happened is the Patriots, someone at the Patriots had read The Obstacle Is the Way. And then obviously there was that devastating loss. And then he had recommended the book to someone in Seattle, to John Schneider, who then read it. And then there was an article about it. And then I came out. I'm trying to think what I remember about that year. But Seattle actually has an interesting track record of finding sort of untraditional people or people that other teams passed on. They sort of have, he does a really good job of that.
Pete and John are still great friends. And I'm so grateful. I remember the day I got cut, John delivered the news. Usually they send down somebody.
Sure. He doesn't want to do it. Yeah.
John was like, I'll go. So he was walking up to me and he had this face like his puppy just died or something. Sure. And he's just kind of like, and I'm like, it's all good, man. Yeah. Like, I'm like consoling him for cutting me because he just was like, I mean,
sure. He probably wanted it to work.
Yeah. I think they did. And, and it's all good. I wasn't the best man for the job. And I own that. And it is what it is. But yeah, something about they love to find guys with a chip on their shoulder. And that's why I got a shot up there. And, and I had a call also from the St. Louis Rams that offseason, like right after the draft ended. And I had to make a quick decision, Seahawks or Rams. And for me, I mean, initially the back-to-back Super Bowls, that locker room, those personalities and the players, like I was already like, I want to go to Seattle. Yeah. The Rams were 4-12. It was just a different situation. But what really sealed the deal is when, I had the opportunity to talk to Pete and John, and they both were like, look, man, it wasn't just like, hey, we just love to have you up here, and like this Make-A-Wish moment. It didn't feel like that, you know? It really felt like, hey, you are a long shot, man, and it's going to be really tough, but like, we love guys with a chip on their shoulder and your story and, what you've overcome and, the fact that, you started at 3 years at Texas. That's not a bad school. Yeah. You made it happen and you're good at what you do, but you got to get bigger. You got to get stronger. You got to get better. But we want to give you a shot. And that was like, that just spoke to me so much more than anything. And I was like, yeah, this is a real thing,
I asked John, I was like, as a GM, what do you look for in players? And he said, one of the things he looks for, obviously you look for all the obvious things.
Right.
And then he was like, but I also look for people who have been through something. It's like they got an injury or they got arrested.
Right.
Or like he was like, they did something and it set them back and then they got through it. Because he's like, especially in like rookies, right? So, you know, the trajectory of a rookie is that you were great, probably one of the best at what you did, or you wouldn't have made it into the NFL.
Right.
And then you're not good comparatively, right?
Right.
Like you get introduced to this very steep learning curve.
For the
when
first
you make
time
it
in
to
your
the
life,
highest,
for the
Yes.
first time in your life, you're not the big man on campus.
Yeah. So how have you adjusted to similar learning curves in your life, right? Where, yeah, your freshman year, you didn't start, right? And you fought back, and your sophomore year, you got to start, right? Or yeah, you lost someone or you messed something up, and now you had this huge deficit to overcome. And were you hungry enough and hardworking enough? And could you correct course to do that? Like that's a set of skills that don't show up on a stat sheet, but are ultimately going to be super, super important if you want to be great at this thing. So I imagine part of what they liked in your story is just like, look, if anyone has the capacity to figure it out and to make it work, it's this dude who's been through like real shit before.
Right. And they develop these guys too. I mean, like Geno Smith now, the new quarterback up there. I mean, he's been in the league 10, 11 years, something like that.
But he never quit.
No, he never quit. And he was great in college. He kicked our ass in college when he played for West Virginia. He came here to UT, to Austin, and it was a hell of a game. It was a shootout, but he played out of his mind and they won. And then he goes to the NFL, and he started for a bit, I think, with the Jets, but then benched, and then looked like a career backup, you know. And then all of a sudden, this door, you know, this opportunity. And I think you're absolutely right. Like they gave him, they knew the talent was there, but it was like, but this guy he did not quit. You know, he's just hung in there for all these years. Let's just see what he can do. And then boom. I mean, they didn't even miss a step, you know, after losing Russell Wilson, one of the greatest to ever play in Seattle. And you know, now a lot of people are picking him to go right back to the playoffs, and who knows? I mean, it's pretty wild to see that. And I got a few guys I played with that have spent time up in Seattle, and it's just different up there compared to a lot of places. And that's the only locker room I've been in. I've had the chance to be around some teams and, you know, get to know some of the players, but it is different. I think it's Pete's mentality. You know, he's one of these guys. He was with the Jets and the Pats, and he struggled, you know what I mean, and didn't do well, and went back to college, rethought, how am I doing things? You know, who am I as a person? How do I approach coaching and, you know, building this culture? Like, what am I actually doing, and what can I do different? And then obviously won almost 3 straight national championships. Sorry about that. Yeah. I wasn't on the team, but, you know, but that's incredible. And then goes to Seattle and goes and wins the Super Bowl, and just completely different. So he's one of these people, you know, that bounced back in that way. Yeah,
it's I'm always in awe of like coaches, or you meet like high ranking people and stuff, and you go like, it took you were in your mid 40s when you finally got like your first real shot. You know what I mean? Like how long? Like I wrote my first book when I was 25. So I have, and that seemed like a long time for me. Like that was like years and years of writing and, you know, and not working before I get my first shot. But it's very different when someone's like, you had to be an assistant coach for 30 years before you get your first, you know?
Right.
The system's a little different now, but I'm always impressed by people who they were able to hang on for so long, just that sort of like grit and determination before you get your shot.
Yeah.
That patience is crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy, but you love to see it when it's rewarded, and you hear the stories, and you see you see how much it means to that person. You know, and you're just happy that worked out for that individual, because a lot of us know what that feels like. Not all of us, you know, 'cause not all of us were willing to do that, but those that are, like, we know what that feels like. And even if it's never happened for us yet, you know, and that thing that we love, we know that it's still possible, and we're just going to do it till we die, you know, and just try. And that's enough for me in a lot of ways too. Like there's plenty of things that just aren't going to work out, and that's okay. But as long as if I actually want to do that thing and I'm still passionate about it, I can't stop doing it. I have to. It's going to kill me.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, it's an interesting culture they have there. One of my favorite Pete Carroll thing is like one year he did a film session of the coaches.
Right.
Like he forced the coaches to watch film of themselves on the sideline. Because you think about the culture of sports, it's this relentless breaking down and criticism every week of what you fucked up the previous week, right? And this frame by frame, you could have done this, you were supposed to do this. And players obviously get better from that, but it's like a grueling, relentless process where you never really get to, you're not sitting around going, it's so awesome to be in the NFL. You're like week to week, like just being broken down and rebuilt every time. But the coaches are typically above that, right? And the coaches don't have to watch. Look at you, you're yelling at this person and look at their reaction. Like, look at how it's doing the opposite of what you wanted to do. And so I always think about that. Like, how are you actually getting feedback for what you do? Or do you think feedback is for everyone but you?
Right. Well, I noticed this in Seattle when I was up there. And I think it's something that he probably preaches to his assistants and to the whole staff, was like, there wasn't really negative yelling. There's yelling for sure. But if somebody's screwing up, they either know already, or if they don't, I think there's more value in taking them to the side and say, hey, look, if you don't fix this thing, you're either going to get cut or you're just not going to play, and it's that simple. And it's like, I don't need to embarrass you in front of everybody else. I don't need to make this, a thing, like,
Yeah.
But it's that simple. Like, you got to make a change and produce those results. And people respond to that, when they're treated with that type of respect instead of dog cussed all the time. And they respond, especially at that level. Like, they're getting paid a good salary, at that point in their life, they're men, you know what I mean? They are grown-ups. And so they want to be treated as such. And I think that, there's certainly a time for that at a certain age that I think there's value as well.
Sure.
Like and in the military, and oftentimes basic training is the height of that. And of course, the average person in basic training is 19 years old. I was archaic for basic training, and I was 23. So, I think that there's something there that maybe, I don't know how much that's been adopted by other teams and stuff like that, but it's something that I just noticed right away. I was like, man, this is just, it's not like a chill environment. Everything is super competitive.
Yeah.
He's all about competing, but at the same time, like, this should be fun. We should be enjoying every day we're out here.
Well, Pete Carroll's coaching philosophy is built around the assumption that confidence is incredibly important, right? That if you don't think you can do something, you're not gonna be able to do it, right? And so I think he said, like, why would you ever do anything that destroys a person's confidence? And so it's not that you don't correct people, it's not that you don't hold them accountable, but sort of yelling and berating them because you don't have self-control, it's not actually getting you or them closer to what you want them to be. It's almost certainly getting them the other direction.
Right.
I think there's kind of a reckoning going on about that in sports. Like, there's not really any evidence that screaming at people makes them better at what they do.
Right.
But that's how everyone's coached them. And so it kind of becomes this cycle of trauma almost. And I think you're starting to see the best coaches not do that. Like, I mean, if you work at Google, your boss doesn't scream at you, and there's elite performance there. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's not how you get the best out of a musician or a best out of, a hedge fund trade. Like, that's actually not how you do it. It's just in sports, probably because it sort of fancies itself being closer to military culture. Maybe it thinks it can get away with it. But I think you don't see Steve Kerr scream in anyone's face. Maybe a ref. But like, But like, that's not how he treats the athletes, right? Well, the ref's not on your team. You know what I mean? Like, screaming at the other people is different, right?
Right.
It's like, but like, you're on the same team. Why would that? I think that's Pete Carroll's point. You want them to be confident. The kicker misses this field goal, you scream at them. Does that make them more or less likely to hit that shot next time? Probably less likely, because now they're in their head about it.
And kickers are already so far in their head about everything. They're hilarious. The most elite one right now is a Longhorn.
Yeah.
But Justin Tucker, talk about confidence. It's just, that guy is one of the most confident players in the league at any position. He just knows when he goes up there, he's going to make it. He just knows, and he knows he's going to hit it pure, and he knows whatever little things he needs to focus on. And, it's I remember seeing that in college, and he wasn't even nearly as good as he is now in college, and he was still very good, but just like another level of he just hit another switch of belief in himself, and it's a lot of it is the work he put in. He worked really, really hard, you know. And
it's interesting. That's like the only position you can get the yips in football. Like a quarterback never gets it. I've never heard of a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean they slump, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean all of a sudden they just can't hit a pass.
Yeah,
you know,
right,
they're just
right.
it's at everybody's feet all the time. But no, the kicker, yeah, it is wild. I think
because I think it's the only repetitive motion if you think about it. Like every play in football is different.
Long snapping.
Yes. Well, I'm sure. Yeah,
but you
I'm
can in long snapping too.
all the kicking, the kicking related positions you get the yips from. Because
that's true. Yeah, it's for the most part, it's a closed skill as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, maybe the hold's a little bit different, but by and large, it's the same. You're planting the same spot, and you're swinging the leg the same way. And
there's only 100 places you can do it from.
And you sit on the sideline.
Yeah.
For 30, 45 minutes at a time.
Sure.
Occasionally, without getting to do your thing, and then you have to go out there and just all of a sudden be perfect and you know, kick it 66 yards like J-Tuck, and that's I mean that's crazy.
Oh, it's crazy, and you have to completely wipe the slate clean whether you hit it last time or didn't hit it last time.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing, that fire and forget. I mean, you see that in golf, but you see that in a lot of things in life. I think that's a very, very much a life thing. Like just even if it was a good shot, dumping that, you know,
it's almost more important.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you get complacent quick.
Yeah,
you know, if you start being like, oh, I just crushed that last one, I'm fine, I got this, and then all of a sudden it goes sideways.
Right, because when you say I got this, that's the moment you abandon the process or the humility of it. Like I was reading the boxer Floyd Patterson, he was talking about, he's like the fight that he loses the title to, he was like, I wasn't afraid. He was like, I knew there's something wrong because I wasn't afraid.
It's interesting.
Because I got this, like I'm the best. And that's when they get you.
Yeah.
You know? And so there is, that's what keeps it exciting, but also sort of makes it hard to enjoy, is that you never actually get to feel like you've made it because you're doing it every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in writing, the rule is your last book doesn't write your next one. Like you finish it.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it sells 1 million copies, it sells 10 copies. Like you're still starting blank page, next one. And so if you go, I got that, like you, on the one hand, you have to believe I can do this, and you know that you can do it because you just did it. But you also know that belief doesn't get you anything. You still have to do it from scratch over again. Or like a comedian, right? You do the hour special and then all that material is now dated and you have to build a new hour totally from scratch.
Yeah.
So you got to believe you can do it, and then you also got to be willing to do the work and not cut the corners and rebuild it a new set.
I think for me too, the fear aspect, if I don't have fear anymore, if I'm not afraid of it, then it probably doesn't mean that much to me anymore.
Sure.
Like, at least for me.
It's a sign.
You know,
Yeah.
And that's something that doesn't mean I need to just abandon it, but like figuring out why I'm feeling that way, or why I don't really care about this still. Cause that's when I easily get lazy, and you know, I'm not performing because I don't have, like, my senses aren't all switched on. You know what I mean? My hyper awareness, like it's just not there.
What also means you're probably not lifting a challenging enough weight with how you're doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So like if you're doing the same thing you've done many times, it's not, you're like, I got this, because you've literally done this exact same thing. But if you're trying to do, you know, faster time or at a higher level, or, you know, you're trying to kick a further distance, like if there's something inherently new about it, you're going to be, I think, more alive to it, but then also a little afraid of it, because like you said, like the answer is uncertain because you haven't done it before. So you don't know. Maybe, but the maybe is what keeps it interesting.
Right. It's true. Maybe. That's an answer. That's one of my common answers to a lot of questions, you know.
Is maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. And part of it's like, part of it, even when I feel super confident, like it's keeping myself, I think, a bit humble in the situation, you know, to understand that, yeah, you've done this before, but like maybe you won't do it again, or as well, or maybe.
Have you seen that movie, The Disaster Artist?
Yeah.
About, you know, the room? Was
yes.
I doubt that guy ever doubted himself. Like the guy that made the worst movie ever, what I would make up about that character from what I've read about him and seen is like his superpower / kryptonite is that he is not aware of how awful he is.
Yeah.
Right. Like how fundamentally untalented, unappealing,
right.
and, like not good he is. And so, I mean, a more self-aware person would have not pulled off what he pulled off because they would have quit. Right. So he gets through it and he gets himself in positions. I mean, they're not making a movie about my life, right? So he gets himself into cool positions, but at the same time, he's making shitty stuff because he has no actual ability to step outside himself or to see this thing as hard or difficult or,
right.
Like requiring something that maybe he doesn't have. That maybe I shouldn't be doing this. That's what keeps it interesting, but also makes it good.
What for you, what at a young age, like grabbed at you? Like what was to get you into this world, into writing and into just this curiosity that you have?
I mean, I loved books, but it took me a while to actually get that people made them, that it was like a thing you could do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just thought it's like, obviously, people play professional sports, but you're not like, after you're like 10, you're not like, that's me, because you don't see yourself in that. Or if you do, that's because you're meant to do it or what. But I think for me, it was the moment was like seeing, I remember I had this college professor, her name was Susan Straight, and my freshman year of college, they assigned her novel.
Okay.
And we all had to read it. And then she like talked to this seminar we were in. And like, so they give us all the book and it's like got an award stamp on the front and then she was just like in the room, and I was just like, oh, she's just like a person. You know what I mean? She's not like, I mean, even that writers didn't live in New York City and live these here she is I went to Riverside. She was at this just regular person, professor at Riverside, and she's from Riverside. She's writing about her experiences. I think that was one of a series of kind of peeks behind the curtain that you're like, it's not that it was attainable, but that it was concrete and real. And then I was a research assistant for this guy, Robert Greene, who wrote the 48 Laws of Power and all these amazing books. And he showed me how books were made. Because as his assistant, I'm like doing all, but I was like, oh, this is just a process. This is like a thing that you do. It's probably like when you were an intern working on those movies, you saw how a thing goes from a script to a movie you're watching in the theaters, and it demystifies it. It doesn't let you know that it's easy,
right?
But you see that it is a series of hard things to pull off. But like, if you can learn how to do all those individual things, then maybe you can pull it off.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I just often wonder that with creatives and people that are successful creatives and people that, and creatives is like a loose term. It doesn't just mean actors, writers, entertainers or whatever. There's just people that make stuff.
Yeah.
And what sort of like triggered them, but where did they get that belief that they could do it? Because I think I talked about the insecurity thing earlier, but I think most people that compete at a high level do have a decent amount of insecurity somewhere.
Sure.
Like and not that they struggle with it, but they embrace it and they recognize it maybe. Maybe they don't even talk about it, but like they know.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what makes us, get up a little bit earlier and, start a little bit, whatever, just pour ourselves into it. At least with me, because I don't want to feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
And I want to find out like why, what is so amazing about this that I am mystified, like, that, and then as you dig into it and learn about it, and whether it was my time in the special forces or in football or whatever, it's not that it was easy, but it was simpler than I thought. It was simpler if it's broken down into these pieces. It's like, okay, certainly not easy to do.
Yeah.
And most people will never try, but it is just like this other thing,
Yeah.
And it's there. I think about things that I have no knowledge of at all from a technicality standpoint. When I think of technology generally.
Yeah.
Like I'm not savvy when it comes to that, but I do think that if I all of a sudden had a great interest in that, maybe I could learn. It might take me a little bit longer. I'm not the smartest guy in the world and, all that, but like I could do that thing. I think I could,
Well, the important skills are less related to the technical specifics of the thing and more about like, can you learn? Can you ask questions? Are you good at forming relationships?
Right.
Do you believe your own bullshit? Something you don't want to do, like it's all these other things and that are the real killers. And so if you can kind of conquer those first, then all that's left is the actual skill acquisition,
right.
which isn't easy and it's not a guarantee, but.
Yeah, I think that when you mentioned listening, like that's a lost art,
of course.
And that's something that I think I don't know why we struggle so much with it. I don't know if it's because attention spans are lower because of, the world we live in now with technology. I don't know, but it's, and I don't like sounding or feeling like this old curmudgeon that's just like, no one knows how to listen anymore. Yeah. It's kind of wild to just, because not everybody's like that, certainly, but it feels like a large population people really are, and they don't even want to hear somebody else's perspective or point of view or why they feel the way that they feel. Like, they always ask that, or they used to ask that question when you're younger, like if you could sit down with anybody in history and have a conversation, like most of the people I would want to sit down with are history's greatest villains, and not because I'm attracted to what they, did. It's horrible stuff. But I want to try to understand, like, where did this come from? And like, why? How did you get to this place where you felt like this was the best thing for society? You know what I mean? Or for your community or whatever. Like, where did that come from? Because I'm curious. It's wild.
Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, his line was 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah, right.
That you should basically listen more than you talk, or respect that ratio. And then the other line from the Stoics is like, conceit is the impediment to knowledge, or you can't learn that which you think you already know. So it's like, listening to me is this inherently humble thing of like, I don't know, I want to learn about it. You tell me, as opposed to let me tell you. And so the willingness to go, I want to go talk to someone who's really good at this thing and learn everything I can from them, as opposed to, I'll go figure it out by myself. Like, why would you learn by experience when you could learn from the experiences of others? And that's really the impediment of ego, is that it just forces you to do stuff on your own or the hard way, when like somebody could tell you exactly how to do the thing that you want to do. They're dying for someone to ask them, like, what's the secret? Like, they're dying and nobody does.
Right. Yeah, no, that is interesting. I think it's Socrates, right? The only thing I'm certain about, or the only thing I know for sure, is that I know nothing at all.
Yeah.
That type of humility from one of the greatest minds in history.
Well, even think about, like, I think we take it for granted with the Socratic method. Like, it's just so ingrained what it is. But like, inherently, the Socratic method is not Socrates, a very wise person, going around telling people stuff. The Socratic method, or Socrates' method, if you look at the dialogues, is he just asks a lot of questions. He asks a question and then they answer, and then he's like, but what about this? And he's like, but what about this? I think that's kind of why they killed him, is it's real annoying, like, because when people are constantly questioning assumptions, that's threatening. But he becomes wise because instead of having the conceit of knowledge, he has this profound interest in the acquisition of knowledge. And he has this skepticism about what people are saying and, what the assumptions they're making.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, and that's where we're at right now, where it's just, I feel like so many people are so sure of what they know as the truth, and the however they receive their information. I shouldn't say knowledge.
Even information might be generous.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
This is just fucking shit that they're consuming off the internet.
Totally. And it's wild. I mean, it's, I see it in people very close to me in different aspects of my life. And I have a lot of different groups of people I associate with. And it's just interesting to hear those different opinions. And I'm like, oh, I understand why you feel that way, but have you thought of this? And, I don't know. I'm like the ultimate devil's advocate. I love to play that game, but I love to play that game because I don't really know what is and what isn't. And sometimes often something I'm so sure of and feel so strongly about is absolutely challenged, and it changes me, and then sometimes it swings back the other way, and it's just it's that constant game. Like I am I don't know what I actually believe. I really don't. I know what I think and I feel, but
my wife was telling me she's reading this book about medicine, and like the statistics were showing that like if you have something that needs to be diagnosed, you actually want a younger doctor, because that doctor's so basically if you have something that needs to be diagnosed, you want a younger doctor.
Okay.
If you have a procedure that needs to be done, you want an older doctor. And that so basically an experienced surgeon has been in this situation countless times. They're prepared for all the contingencies. They have thousands of hours. They're masters at this thing. If you have that master in the room diagnosing you, they have a lot of preconceived notions. They've been burned a lot of times. They're more likely to tell you what they think as opposed to elicit from you all the information and the potential disconfirmation. Right. And I think that's an interesting way to think about knowledge, that like there's a difference between, but you have to be careful that your mastery and your experience doesn't also make you rigid and arrogant, and like Napoleon talks about not wanting to form a picture. Like if you have if you believe you know how it's going to go, you're closed off to information that might be leading you to believe it could go a very different way.
Right.
And you've got to be sort of open and receptive to all the things that can happen. The more your identity is tied up in certain beliefs, for instance, the less likely you are to change your mind, because now you have to go, but I, as a Republican, do not like those kinds of people. Or me, as a Democrat, believes that this is what's right. So now the world's giving me this information about, hey, this policy we came up with is not working. But what am I going to do? Believe something that the people I don't like believe?
Right. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Speaking of belief, I have had this conversation with several people, and you get different answers every time. And like, do you think you choose what you believe or no?
What do you mean?
So like a lot of people choose, whether it's religion, right? God.
Sure.
A lot of people say, well, no, I choose to believe that, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, or whatever this thing is. And where my mind immediately goes is, well, if you're choosing to believe it, you don't actually believe it. You're just saying that you believe it. Like if you actually believed it, it wouldn't be a choice to me. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I genuinely believe this thing, so I'm not making a choice of whether I do or not. But people will argue that and be like, no, belief is a choice, belief in something. I don't know.
Well, on the most basic level, like you believe what you believe and you think a lot of what you think because of where you're from, who your parents were, when you were born.
Right.
And it's not like, it's kind of mind-blowing, but it's not exactly like a breakthrough insight to go, but if you were born in India 100 years ago, or if you were born in the South, in 1840, you'd have different beliefs, right? Or if you were born to this kind of family or that, so much of what we have is a product of, our circumstances, the times we're in. And yet, the idea that we don't have any agency would be a pretty dark, depressing way. Like if we're 100% a product of our environment, that we can't change our mind, that we can't form our beliefs, change our assumptions, whatever. It's like, well, then what are we all doing here? Like this is all the Stoic sort of view on this stuff was that they had this image of like, we're like a dog tied to a cart. So like this thing is pulling us and we're not strong enough to stop it necessarily, but we can decide kind of like, we have some leeway we have some slack in that rope. We have some control
Right.
over it. And so I kind of think about it that way. First off, I think it's humbling and eye-opening to just be like, yeah, like I am much more a product of my environment than I would perhaps like to believe. And then ironically, in realizing that, it gives you some power over your environment to go like, wait, why do I think Jesus is our Lord and Savior? That's because when I was 2 years old, my parents told me that and forced me every day or, every week to go to a thing where all the adults around me, the people I admired the most, reiterated to me this is true over and over again. Well, now that I'm an adult, I have the ability to go, is that true?
Right.
Do I believe that? Like how much of this is real? And so I think it's both we do control our beliefs and we don't. We don't control our beliefs and we do.
That's a terrible answer. It's great.
But that's life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's
that's
paradoxical.
great.
It's
That's
paradoxical.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, I mean, and not that we never choose. We always choose our actions, or whether we're going to learn about something. I mean, you choose to research something or to question something.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, well, maybe you don't choose to question it, but you choose to like seek that out. If you're questioning things, you could ignore it.
Sure.
You're like, I'm questioning the thing. No, but it's not.
Yeah, a lot of people do that all the time.
A lot of times, yeah. And I think there's value in that. And I think when I think of it from a religious standpoint, the word faith to me insinuates doubt. I mean, there is doubt.
Sure.
You have to have it or you don't have faith. So there's a lot of people in various religions that are like, they will say, without a doubt, I know this is the way and this is correct. And I'm not saying that's bad or wrong, but that's not faith. You know what I mean? That's not faith, because faith is like without that doubt that it might not be true, then there is no faith to actually pursue that belief, I guess, in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
like I just that's just how it feels to me. Like if it's like when you say to yourself, I just got to have faith. I just got to have faith. I got to think that it's possible. It's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so if you think that it's possible, then you don't know. You just think, or you hope or whatever. So that faith thing, and that's a big, at least in the, in Christianity, that's a big component is faith, not through, they say salvation is through faith, not by works, not by the things that we do, but that belief and that hope and whatever. But with that, to me, is like a great amount of doubt that you'll never get rid of and you'll always wonder. And you want to just continue to research that thing. And I think that goes for a lot of things in life, not just religion. But those are the things that are.
I've always thought that to be totally nonsense. Like, let's say God does exist, right? He creates this universe. Let's talk about the Christian God, because that's the one I'm most familiar with. And he's like, the most important thing isn't what you do. It's not how you treat the other people that I've made.
It's just that you believe
the
in
most
me.
important thing is that you believe in me. And by the way, I'm going to make it really hard to know whether I exist or not. So, in fact, I'm going to sow all sorts of doubt about whether I exist or not. And just the main thing is you believe me. You believe in me.
Yeah. No, I struggle.
That's not what Jesus, like if the Bible is the Bible, that's certainly not. Jesus talked a lot about works, and then did a lot of works, right?
Yeah.
So that's always struck me as a silly proposition.
No, I agree. And I think it all comes down to interpretation, right? And I think there's a lot of things in a lot of religious works that, one mind conflicts with another, and maybe in the Bible, one book may conflict with another, or maybe within this book, one line may conflict with another. And it all comes down to how, we are interpreting those things. But, I'm with you on that. Like, it's a matter of like, are you doing these works for your own salvation, or are you doing these things because they're the right thing to do and you care about your fellow brother and all that? And I think those, in probably most religious teachings, like that's the baseline of like what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to be about the community and about others. And it's not, but if like the goal and the focus is like my own salvation, I can go do all this terrible shit.
Sure.
But if I ask for forgiveness and I say, whether it's out loud or in my mind, that, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, or whatever this is, and of course we're just using the Christian example, then I'm okay. Like I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
I think that, and obviously I don't know whether there is a God or not, or what his intent, but like, or her intent or whatever. But like that's what I've always struggled with in those communities, is like the idea that, well, don't you want to go to heaven? And I'm like, I do, if the people that I look up to and maybe aspire to be and I'm inspired by are also there. But if they're not, because they didn't say this thing, sure. I don't know if I want to hang out with those people, because that's not my tribe. Like, I don't feel the connection to that group.
Or I don't want to go to heaven. I don't want to go to a heaven where, for most of human history, the places that had not been exposed to Christianity, all those people are burning in just hell damned. For eternity because they happen to be in Africa instead of, the 14th century France.
Totally.
It's a preposterous.
And there's certain people that will say that, well, on Judgment Day, they'll get another shot, and I mean, how do you know that? Like, do you know that? I don't know. But even so, there'll also be other ones to be like, well, that's why we have, missionaries, and that's why people go and preach the gospel and all that. So they all have had the opportunity. I'm like, sure. So you're telling me the person that knocks on your door in a suit and tie, you gave them the time of day and you actually listened to them, because that's a different idea or a different religion or whatever. But you had your thing, and you're like, no thanks.
I do feel like I grew up, my parents went to church. I grew up Catholic, and then I sort of in college I read, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, all these sort of atheist guys. And then I was like, yes, God definitely does not exist. Right. So I just went from one to the other. And then as I've gotten older, I'm agnostic in the sense that I'm actually like, I don't fucking know. I just know I don't buy a lot of what these people are selling, because it's mostly about, your mega church or your enormous mansion.
It's a lot about discrimination.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I don't love.
No, when you read the Bible, it's very hard to hear the example and the life of Jesus and not be like, I'm on board with that.
Absolutely.
And then it's also very hard to see literally any of that in any denomination of Christianity.
Like within the people, you mean?
Yeah, even within the frameworks or the set of beliefs that the church upholds. Like, it's also interesting for me, writing about ancient philosophy. I think a lot of people who are religious have never really been exposed that much to history or to philosophy. So they feel like one feels like very ancient, and like Jesus and Seneca were born the same year. So, and lived both in the Roman Empire, both from provinces of the Roman Empire, both enormously successful philosophers in their own lifetime, both ultimately killed by the Roman state, gruesomely so. And then as much as I am interested in and find a lot of value in Jesus's teachings, the Sermon on the Mount and all of that, and then I read Seneca, I'm like, this sounds like it's coming from a real fucking person, like a real flesh and blood human who's talking about the world that he is living in as a flesh and blood human.
Is somebody transcribing Seneca's words, or Seneca?
Seneca wrote essays, and we have a book of Seneca's letters that he wrote to his friend.
That's what I'm saying. That's maybe the difference. A lot of this,
of course,
it's an interpreted version of what was said. Somebody else wrote it down, and then
but
I don't know.
Seneca's never like, I am the son of God. He's not he's not professing to have any magical powers, or he's not threatening heaven or hell, or he's not speaking on anyone's authority but his own. And again, Seneca writes these letters, Seneca's letters, he's writing to his friend Lucilius, who has the same job as Pontius Pilate. Right. It's just it's fucking real. Like when you read the Stoics, it's real people who had real jobs. Cato is a senator. We have senators now. You know what I mean? Like when I'm reading the Stoics, I'm like, these are people who, they're not mystics. There's nothing magical about it. No faith is required. It is, here's some tried and true strategies to make you a better person, to make you less scared, less angry, more patient, more decent. And there's a lot of that in Jesus, but there's also, let me tell you this parable about, this thing. Did it actually happen or not? Nobody knows, all that.
Yeah, so, no, that's super interesting. That's super interesting. Yeah, I think to go back on the framework and what you were talking about, sort of the idea. I mean, Gandhi, I'm paraphrasing for sure, but he was like, basically, I'm on board with Christianity. I just don't love your Christians. You know what I mean? Because it was not just the imperfection of man, the frailty of man, or whatever. We all know that we are, we're full of sin or mistake or whatever you want to call it. We screw up every day. But it's like it's owning that and having that openness and just the understanding or the
funny thing about Gandhi is way more Christian than the occupying British. You know what I mean?
Right.
Gandhi isn't opening up with
more
machine
Christ-like.
guns on crowds of people, you know? Yeah, Gandhi, it's like Gandhi read the story of Christ and then decided to actually live in a Christ-like way.
Yeah.
And really the brilliance of Gandhi and then also Martin Luther King is like, it's like, oh, you really believe this? And then reflecting back to the occupying powers, whether it's the British or it's, sort of the American South, reflecting back like, you don't believe this. You profess to believe it, but look at what you did. You just opened up with fire hoses on children. Like, tell me where that's in the Bible, right? Tell me where that's in the Constitution, right? And the sort of purity of like, they actually took it seriously and literally is what, changed the world.
Totally. Yeah.
I want to going back to the movie. I was curious, like how close to the character with Z's journey was yours? Like, did you come back angry and struggling to readjust, or was that's a common story, but it's not your story?
Yeah. So in the end credits, there's two veterans, AJ and Denver, who speak, right? So the backstory of Zephyr is based on their backstories. So AJ, he was living with his mother, homeless much of his youth, and really struggled with, when she got remarried and to not a nice person, and he just couldn't wait to leave and never come back. His whole thing was, I'm never coming home. Yeah. And with Denver grew up in Ventura County, and just kind of a tough childhood once again, and ran to the Marine Corps, and then went off and was in 2-7 in that battalion. They lost 29 guys on back-to-back deployments, and I think now the number is 56 or so to suicide since they came back in 2009. And so both of these guys, Denver was living in that shelter. That's a real place. We shot on location in this veterans homeless shelter. And AJ and Denver had started to become buddies. They got connected through, I can't even remember what. It may have been through the beginnings of MVP, but I think it was through something else. But anyway, those two guys really built MVP in the sense of like brought in those first vets. I had the opportunity to go down there to that shelter. So I was almost a bit in Will's shoes when I first met Denver.
Sure.
I had just gotten done with playing football, and a guy I know who was formerly homeless, who started this shelter, he was like, you got to come down, hang out with these guys, talk to them. And I went down there and I met Denver, and I met some other people, and Denver was not excited, but somebody was down there to cheer him up. You know what I mean? Sure. And I totally get that. And, but we ended up connecting afterwards and talking and getting to know him and his story. And then they really built MVP. But to your point, a lot of what was written, first of all, pretty much everything that was written has either been said in an MVP session on the mat there, or something I've felt or said or heard from somebody, from another veteran. So there was a lot of me in that character, and a lot of things I felt, but I didn't really transition or feel like I'd lost that uniform or identity until football was over, because I went right into football. Sure. And even when I was playing football at Texas, I was still in the National Guard. So in the summers I was going to Afghanistan, so I was a very high octane, operation tempo of just go, take your finals early, go to Afghanistan, come back a day before training camp, go to practice, play football, go to school, do it all again next year. And I loved it, and I volunteered to do all those things. I made that choice. But then I went to Seattle for about 4 or 5 months. I got cut, and all of a sudden it was like, just done. And so that was my transition moment, really, was at 34. And that's not long after I started MVP with Jay Glazer. But But yeah, it was really a lot of them in those characters, a lot of AJ and Denver in that Zephyr character. But some of the self-harm stuff, a lot of vets, I think a lot of people experience, but in a physical manner and also in a mental manner. We beat ourselves up like big time. We really struggle with being grateful for what we did, or grateful is not the right word. Appreciating our, what we were willing to sacrifice and giving ourselves, a pat on the back, as cheesy as that sounds, but sure. It's ingrained in us that it is the team, and it is. But understand that you're a part of that team as an individual. Like you did some pretty incredible stuff, and you sacrificed so much. Like you're still that person now. You can go do anything else. You can change the world, continue to change the world, and you can continue to fight for those who can't fight for themselves or whatever you want to do. But yeah, with the film, every single vet portrayed on screen is played by an actual vet. So even Dan Loria, who was the dad on the Wonder Years back in the day, I don't know if you recognize him in there. He's a Vietnam vet.
Really?
So all those vets were played by vets. And a lot of the athletes from Randy Couture, Tony Gonzalez, Strahan and Howie Long have a cameo. Jared Bunch, who plays Ray, the other NFL player, he played, for the Giants for 4 years, and injury ended his career. All those, like so many of the characters. I mean, Mo McRae, who played Will Phillips, who was spectacular. He's one of the only, at least leading males in it.
Yeah.
He is probably the only leading or bigger role male in it that's not a veteran athlete.
Really?
Yeah. And Tom Arnold has got that nice little cameo.
Yeah.
But even the women like Christina Ochoa and Dina Shihabi, like they are very ingrained in the veteran world, and that's why they wanted to be a part of this, because I mean, all these people worked for next to nothing.
Yeah.
All of them. Like no one got a big paycheck there because we didn't have it. I mean, we made it for nothing. So, it was just a lot of, I don't even want to say favors. They were just passionate about the story and what merging vets and players is, and they just wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. Jay Glazer, I think, has the best line in the whole movie.
Which line?
He says, I know what's behind my rib cage and between my ears.
That's what makes me great.
Yeah. That, to me, that's one, the definition of confidence. And then two, the Stoics would say, the greatest empire is to rule over oneself, right? And so the ability to be like, I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. I got this, which is why I'm confident that I got that. To me, that's the work. That's what you're trying to do. Yeah.
And that's something that Jay and Randy say all the time.
Really?
Yeah. It's something they say. They'll talk about it at an MVP huddle, but they'll talk about it on the street to a stranger too, or to a fighter that's young, and they're trying to get in that mental game, because so much of these fights are won before they've even begun. You know what I mean? It's really true. But that's what Randy did that was different. Randy's one of these guys that in the ring or in the octagon, he just rounds over and he's dog tired, and he's like, I got beat last round.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit on my bench and get water and all this. I'm going to stand there and bounce around, and my hands aren't going on my hips.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to look at the guy and make it a thing. I'm just going to act like this is just what I do. This is who I am, which it is. It becomes who you are. Your habits define you.
Sure.
But he's doing that, and at the corner of his eye, he's noticing this other fighter sitting across, like, how does this dude have that much, like, how is he not tired? And Randy's exhausted. He's dying, but he's like, this is the mental game right here. And if I do this, I'm winning I'm winning between the rounds. You know what I mean? So then the next round they come out and the guy's coming up with this, like, oh man, like I thought I had him last round. I thought I beat him to submission, but he's over there raring to go. I'm in trouble, and once that's happened, it's over. So that's between the rib cage and between the ears.
When I imagine as you do this ultra marathon, you're going to run into a wall at some point, and you're going to have to know.
Probably earlier than I want.
And you're going to have to go like, look, I'm the person that was there in Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm this person that was, everyone said it was impossible to make a college football team. I'm the person they said had no chance to be in the NFL. Like, you've done all these things. You know what you're capable of. And that's what you draw on in those moments where, the thing looks impossible or overwhelming or very unlikely. Right.
Yeah. That's what I have to. I have to remember that. And it's sometimes hard to in the moment. It's nice to have friends remind you.
Yeah.
I mean, that is definitely helpful. And that's another sort of tenet of MVP is, we got your back, and it's a community doing this. It's not just MVP, that's life. You need those people to, it's not just pumping you full of bullshit either.
Sure.
It's just reminding you who you are,
yeah.
And what you've done, because we soon forget. And once we deconstruct that difficult, challenging thing, and we realize it's simple but not easy, and there is that process,
yeah.
then maybe we also forget from an outside perspective,
sure,
how crazy this other thing is that we're looking at, and like how impossible it seems to run 100 miles or whatever. But until you can kind of get under the hood and start to do that, and be there in that moment, be able to draw parallels with these other things. That's how we get through it. And I think a lot of people wonder, well, but I've never done anything big or great. And it's just like, you got to start small. You got these little stupid things that seem, they seem pointless maybe, but going back to basic training, the moment for me in basic training that gave me this ultra belief in myself, from a physical standpoint, and belief of what my body could endure, was we were probably about halfway through, and we'd been granted the opportunity on Sundays. You can go to church, and you can go to the PX if you need to get something, and you can go get a little extra workout in if you want. You've had like a few hours, a little window of some free time. Some people, squared away their locker and took a nap, and totally respect that, but I put my body armor on, and I would go down to the track, and one day I did a mile of lunges, and it was like,
Jesus.
Exactly. But that's how I felt. That's what I thought. But I was like, I just want to see if it's possible. Like, I'm gonna see how far I can go. So I start going. I'm a quarter of the way into the first quarter mile, and the legs are shaking, and I'm already like, this is really hard, but I just kept doing it, and I kept doing it. Pretty soon I'm halfway through that quarter, and then I've got a quarter done, and then I'm half mile done. I'm halfway done. I'm like, this is home stretch. Yeah. And I still feel all those things, and it's super hard. Maybe that was my cave moment. Yeah. Like, I'm seeing how deep did the cave go. But I just kept going. I kept going. I finished it, and I got done, and I'm like limping back to the barracks, just like jello. And I'm like, man, this is dumb. We got 10 miles in the morning, but I did it. And I just was like, if I can do this, man, I don't know what I can't do. And that's something that Jay said to me too, when I got to spend some time with him, before the Seahawks, and got to train at his gym. And, that's kind of his whole mindset through this, Unbreakable Performance Center is just, I'm not sure. I know what you can do. I've seen that, but I'm not sure what you can't do. You know what I mean? Sure. And I can't wait to see what that looks like. And that was something, when he told me that, I was just like, okay. I mean, that's just sort of clicked for me, and it made me think of that moment and a lot of other things where it was like, I didn't know what I couldn't do either, until
you only learn your max weight by continually adding weight until you can't lift it anymore. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so you have to be willing to sort of push that further and further and further. And then, sometimes you go, okay, that's too much. I took on too much. Or I'm unhappy doing that much. That's not the direction I want to go in. But you do have to sort of continually push and sort of question and go, can I go a little bit further? Can I go a little bit faster? Can I do a little bit better? And I think that's the skill that makes people great. Like, obviously people think Tom Brady's obsessed with winning. I think Tom Brady is actually obsessed with performance, with releasing the ball a little bit faster, making the routes better. He's obsessed with the component pieces. Right. And if you get really obsessed with that, it tends to culminate in, Bill Walsh's thing about how, the score takes care of itself. Like, if you're obsessed with getting better at the pieces, you tend to get better results out of the other side. It's not guaranteed, but if you're obsessed with that, then.
And even when the result doesn't go your way, if you did all you could, and you are okay with it. Typically, you can walk away, and it sucks. It hurts for a bit, but you're like, I did everything I could, and you know what I mean. And on this day, that opponent was just a little bit better than me, and that's okay. But I did everything that I could.
The talk I just gave at the Naval Academy, I ended with this story about Jimmy Carter. So Jimmy Carter goes to the Naval Academy in 44 46, maybe graduates in 46. And so he wants to be on nuclear submarines. So he ends up, at that time, all the candidates are interviewed by Admiral Hyman Rickover, who's sort of the head of this program. He does it for years and years and years. And so it's this interview process. It's the best of the best. It's the most competitive slot. And so it's sort of this long interview. They talk about books and they talk about physics and they talk about history. And then finally Rickover goes, how did you do in your class at the Naval Academy? Rickover's like, Carter's like, great. I was like 32 out of, 400, whatever. He's thinking about rank. And they sort of talking about his grades and how great he did. And Rickover just goes, but did you always do your best? And he's, of course, your instinct is, yeah, of course, right? And then he's like, thinks about it. And he's like, well, he's thinking about all the times he didn't do his best, right? Like all, classes that he phoned in or, he could have gone and done extra PT, he doesn't. And he goes, you know what? No, I didn't always do my best. And then Rickover goes, why not? And then he just gets up and leaves. And that question sort of haunts Jimmy Carter for the rest of his life. Like his campaign biography when he runs for his first office is called Why Not the Best? Like, why didn't you do your best? And so, I think people who are really great, and people don't always think of him as a great president. He actually was a great president and was a much better ex-president. Like, without question, the best person ever to have been president. Like, I mean, up until a couple of years ago, he was still building houses for Habitat for Humanity. He's cured all these diseases. He's brokered all these peace treaties and stuff. A great human being. But really great people are not actually thinking about, here's my list of accomplishments. They're like, I always did the best I could do in the situation that I was in. I didn't quit, 3 laps in. Like, I went until I fucking fell over, like that. To me, it's like, did you do your best? Yes or no?
Yeah. And I think with that, at least for me, I don't know if there's ever truly 100%.
Sure.
Because throughout that, if it's something hard, you're going to have the false step here and there, and the debate in your head about quitting and whatever. And there might be a bit of wasted, I don't know if it's wasted time, but not productive time in that moment. But like, if you just I think your best is dealing with that and seeing through that.
Sure.
So it's not like your 100% optimal performance at all times or whatever. It's just not. I mean, it really is just not quitting in a sense.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean that's absolutely I think that's in common with pretty much anybody that does anything at a high level. Is just that.
Well, I love that question too, because it's like, you're like, oh, we won or we lost. It's like, did you do your best? And it's like, no. And why? Like, what reason did you have for not doing your best? Yeah. Not like, the question isn't, why weren't you perfect? Right? Why didn't you succeed? The question is, why at some juncture where you could have given 100% and you gave 76%. What was the reason? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, when I look at the book, I don't go like, is this the greatest book ever? I go like, is it the best book I was capable of doing? And if the answer is like, no, I could have done better if I did more time. Well, it's like, why didn't I ask for more time? Like, why did I accept the premise that it had to come out right now?
Right.
Why didn't I do my best?
It's interesting. Now I'm questioning everything I've ever done. Thanks, Brian.
Of course. Well, I mean, that's the power of that. I mean, it transforms this guy's life. I mean, he was obviously talented and driven and skilled before, but this question of like, yeah, but why didn't you do it? Like, he's like, I don't give a shit what your rank was in the class, right? Because what if you were 30th in your class, but you could have been first, right? Like, that's not a person you want to work with. And then what if you were 300th in your class, but you were only capable of being 300th in your class? Like, that's a person who actualized their potential literally to the highest it could be. And chances are when you ask them to do something, they're going to do the best they are capable of doing. Now, in some cases, like you said, sometimes this long snapper is better than that long snapper. But I imagine when they were like, when you tried out for UT and they were like, okay, he can't be a safety. He does not have but we need a long snapper. And I bet this guy who does his best, I bet we could teach him
Right.
to be a long snapper.
Right.
And he'll give us the best snapping he's capable of giving us, which may be better than this other person who's, very naturally talented, but that doesn't always show up.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. And remembering because I'm so forward thinking, and I'm always like, a lot of people obsess over the past. I obsess over the future.
Sure.
Like I just am always in this, in this place. But remembering, I remember that after I got cut, it took me a little while to appreciate it. But like, then when I would relive the game I got to play, and then the time I got to spend in training camp in Seattle, and getting to play in a college all-star game, and getting to play at Texas, and all those things, going back to like, you never set foot on a field till you were 29. You never even tried to long snap till you were 30. And you got all the way to this place, man. And you got cut. You failed. Yeah. You know what I mean? You lost.
But you went so far through whatever the ceiling was.
Right.
For what was possible when, I know Ryan Shazier a little bit. And it's like, he didn't get to play again the way that he hoped.
Right.
But he also danced at his wedding. You know what I mean? Which from where he was on that moment when he was on the field, paralyzed and like, close to death.
Yeah.
That's pretty far. Like from there to here, that's pretty far. Right. And so you have to think about that. Did you exceed did you break through the ceiling that seemed possible at that time?
Right.
Like, did you outplay your natural abilities?
Shoot for the stars and you land on the moon.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, one of the other themes of the movie is obviously also like how hard it can be for men to ask for help. It seems like both characters are clearly struggling. And there is this sense that Stoicism is like, I got this, right? And how saying I got this can get in the way when you actually obviously don't have it and you need help.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Just when the word stoic, when someone says they have a stoic expression on their face, to me, it's like a very masculine, very like, I don't know what the word is. Stoic is the word. But you just, you look like you're going to be able to endure whatever there is, and you can handle this alone, and you got the means and the framework and the mentality. But I think it's interesting. The whole mental health conversation for me is getting abused at times a bit, and sort of, it's like when people say, oh, they throw the word love around too much, It's like maybe that's getting thrown around too much in some ways, where it's like, it's almost unfair to how important that should be treated, and when you talk about that, and like, because we're supposed to feel a wide range of emotions. We're supposed to feel sad. We're supposed to be angry. We're supposed to be at times depressed. Like, that's just what the human experience is. And we're also supposed to feel joy and gratitude and whatever happiness is, and all those things too. But I think that this idea that if you're not feeling good now too, and you're not feeling okay, that like something's wrong and you need to like fix this, and it's like, we got to treat this, and you got to like tell everybody you're sad, and I'm like, okay, take it easy.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
just stuffing it down and pretending you don't feel it doesn't do anything for anyone either.
The Spartans had mandatory grieving period. I don't know what they called it, but where they would come back from a battle and they had to purge, in a sense, like they were supposed to feel these emotions. And I don't know how much they talked about it or what that all exactly looked like, but just having that awareness, thousands of years ago, knowing that like, if I just hold all this inside, what I saw, what I felt, the loss of my brother, if I don't talk about this and just, suck it up and drive on, like we say, then it's going to eat me alive, and I'm going to be in a way worse place. And it's not going to help me reach that optimal level of being, or of fighting even the next time. Because I'm just going to be so worn out from the inside. I have to like get rid of this. And the best way that I know how is to talk about it, to admit it, to embrace it, you know, to understand that it's totally normal. Like that's why we hate the you know, the P in PTSD, or excuse me, the D in PTSD, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. Like it is not a disorder to feel post-traumatic stress if you've experienced something very traumatic and stressful.
The disordered thing would be to, see people getting, let's say in the Spartans, cut up in front of you at close range, someone with a spear through their eye socket,
right?
And not find that stressful, or
that's a disorder.
Yes, that if you're not feeling stress in combat or after trauma, or you lose someone close to you, you might be a sociopath.
Yeah, totally,
you know what I mean? Like,
totally. No, to not and I understand the you know, the impetus behind that, like disorder to a sense of like you're not able to operate.
You deserve treatment. You deserve special consideration.
Totally.
That's what they mean. But there is some implication that it's not the natural response.
Totally, because I'm diagnosed with it, you know, through the VA and all that, and I understand why, because I have, you know, whether it's recurring dreams or thoughts or feelings and moments where I'm kind of caught off guard with an emotion or with something that reminds me, a smell, a sense, a sound that can. It doesn't set me off in a sense. And that was something that was important to me with the movie, and portraying that it's not always this, we wake up in a cold sweat from this dream, and, you know, Hollywood has
motorcycle backfires.
Yeah, exactly. Hollywood has their way of showing us what PTSD looks like, and it's very different for everybody. And I'm not just talking about veterans either. You know, it's a human condition. But yeah, so I'm diagnosed with that, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't know if I would call it a disorder, because I think because of my post-traumatic stress, I have become a very capable and a very I don't think I would have the constitution that I have, but also the desire and willingness to just go for it in life if I didn't have that. Like if I hadn't experienced those things, and if I didn't
there's also post-traumatic growth.
Totally. And that's what I feel. That's what I feel that it is promoting for me.
Yeah.
Because I survived that, you know, it hardened me. It's like being forged in a fire. It's the same thing. And I think that it you know, when you get through something, and that can be doing a mile of lunges, like there's trauma in that. It's different, of course, but I got through that and I was fine, you know, and it was okay. And I was not only fine, like I was like, man, I just did that and I'm okay and I can keep going. It's like if you have experienced a great loss in your life, or something horrible has happened to you, and I don't even want to, you know, we can all imagine what the most horrible things are, and it happens to, you know, to children. Some of the most severe post-traumatic stress is from children. It's not from veterans. And then to see what people are still capable of and what they accomplish, and so many people that have accomplished some incredible things when you dig back into their history and learn about where they came from and what happened to them, like they had trauma. They experienced some heavy trauma, and they probably felt stress from that, you know, and maybe it was a disorder. I don't know. But either way, it opened up, they're able to access something that other people don't have. You know, there's so much value in it.
Yeah, there's this James Baldwin thing where he says, you know, you think your pain is so unique and special and like unprecedented in the history of the world.
Right.
And it says, and then you read. And realizing that like not just people throughout history have been through stuff, and you can like sort of take heart in their example and be inspired by it, but also like there's so many people around you that are going through the exact same thing as you. And by not talking about it, not only are you not benefiting from their comfort and, you know, experience, but by not talking about it, you're depriving them of the knowledge that you are also going through it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So this sort of stuffing stuff down that we do, whether you're sad about the loss of your father or this addiction that you had, or, you know, whatever the trauma or, you know, thing you're struggling with, by stuffing it down, pretending it doesn't exist, you know, feeling shameful about it, I think it's important to realize like you're harming yourself, but then also you're harming other people. Like if more people talked about the struggle, you wouldn't feel so alone. And then also you can contribute to making people feel less alone by talking about the struggle.
Right. Yeah. And normalizing it because it is normal and it's completely, and and like I said, there's so much value in it. And I don't think if you go out seeking trauma, it's not going to benefit you in the same way because it has to be, to me, it has to be something that was unexpected, something that happened to me that you weren't prepared for, happened to you that you weren't prepared for, right? Because I understand that I've been asked that before too, like it goes back to this grit thing that Pete talks about, like, can you earn grit? I think that was the phrasing. And that's a tough one, like, can you
seek out obstacles to be better?
Yeah. And you can seek out obstacles for sure. But as far as, trauma, maybe, and
life takes care of that.
Yeah. Life takes care of that. If you seek out obstacles, they're going to happen. It's going to come. If it hasn't already, but that's something that there is so much value in that. And that for me, it's even being, vulnerable. I talked about it very early on when we were talking today, but, open about insecurities and still feeling like that 13-year-old kid or whatever age, that just didn't like himself at all, and didn't like the way he looked and didn't like the way that he thought. And, we all have horrible thoughts at times, we just do.
Yeah.
That's just that. I don't know what that is, but we have them and they're there. And just understanding that these things are normal. These things are life. It is a roller coaster. You're gonna feel these high highs and low lows, and the higher the highs, probably the lower the lows at the same time. And riding through those moments and just knowing that this is the human experience and, that the cave as
well, I think
Courtney
people
was
also
talking
do
about.
everyone a disservice by like when they tell their story of like how you got where you got, like particularly when you're successful, is we tell this really simple, clean narrative where it was obvious that it was always going to happen. And like, we're like, I knew from when I was 6, I wanted to be a writer. And it's like, did you really? Or did you also think you were going to be an astronaut and these other things? And only later did that become clear. Right. And so like when you hear people's stories, it can be intimidating because they've polished all the surfaces and rounded off all the edges.
Right.
And then it makes you feel weird and inadequate or incapable because you're like, but my story is not like that. You know what I mean? If you're like, I always knew I could do it and then I did it. Well, it's like, but you didn't always think you could do it. There was the moments where, you were for sure thought you were going to get fired or wasn't going to work. And so by not talking about those, you're actually making this hard thing harder for other people. So if you go, it was easy for me. I just, did X, Y, or Z and now I'm good. Like, well, then this other person who goes like, well, I'm fucking, riddled with insecurity and doubt, and I am crying myself to sleep every night. They think they think they're the weirdo.
Right.
But actually, like, there's nothing weird about it at all.
No. Yeah, that's very true. That is, I guess in a sense, selfish.
Yeah.
But also, it's just not being honest.
Yeah, everyone pretends they have a perfect marriage, and they don't. And then you go like, well, why is my marriage so bad? And it's like, actually, if you knew what everyone else's marriage is like, you'd be pretty chill probably,
You're still married. You're doing great.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I think it also contributes to this sense that we're not all in it together, right? One of the only military metaphors that Marcus uses, he says, like a soldier storming a wall, you've fallen, and now you have to reach and ask a comrade for help. And then he goes, so what? And to me, what I love about that, I think it's so the opposite of the image people think about Stoicism. I love that he goes, you have to ask for help, so what? Like, it not only like, it's not even celebrating, it's like, it's expressing it how it should be seen, which is not a fucking big deal at all.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, hey, could you hand me that? You're not like, how dare you impose, right? Like, exactly. You're like, sure, it's right here. But like, we have this aversion to asking for help, admitting doubt or error, or relying on people, and then it makes it so much harder than it needs to be, especially when we're struggling.
It's just all ego.
Yeah.
It totally is, and we all struggle with it. I think. I think everybody does. I mean, we never want to look stupid. We don't. We just. we want to do everything to look good or avoid looking bad or whatever it is. Like that's just who we are. You know? But I think if just the awareness and understanding that, and then like you kind of alluded to earlier with some of the things you were saying about depriving others.
Yeah.
You know, when you depriving others of the opportunity to help you too,
sure,
it's selfish, man. Like that's all we want to do. Like I you know, we love it nothing more when you've got that person that you admire, maybe even, or you think they've got it all squared away, and then they reach out to you and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or like they want your opinion and they want your help, you know, and you're like, nice, like this is cool. This is good.
When people ask you for help, you're always like, sure. You're like excited, you know? You're never like, oh, these people are always coming to me.
Unless they're always asking you for help on something stupid, you know they can handle that.
Yes. But I mean generally when people are vulnerable about something they're really struggling with and don't know or whatever, and you're excited. When like if your friends come to you and they're like, I don't know what to do, or like, I'm really worried about this. You're like, this is amazing. Like, not only you're excited, but you're like, look at us, you know, like, and then
you actually value my opinion.
Yeah. And
nice.
then you're like, you don't know something, or you have doubts, or you're insecure, and you're like, I don't want to bother them. Or like, they'll hate me for this. And it's like, it's probably much closer to your reaction to things than whatever you're making up about other people.
Yeah. And I think it's often harder the closer that person is to you. Because you're like, nah, I don't want to give them that power. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
also ego, yeah.
I see that a lot I notice that a lot in my, you know, in relationships, you know, where it's like, well, I don't want my girlfriend to, you know, to think that I don't have this covered and I got it figured out. And it's like, if I do this, then I look weak and, you know, all of a sudden they've got the power in this dynamic, and it's just, I mean, it's stupid, but
well, that's, you know, he says that in the movie, and it's kind of become a cliche now. But one of the guys says to your character, you know, like you got to stop taking care of us, and you got to put your oxygen mask on, you know. And it's the idea of like also like you can admit you're struggling, like, and you're going to give these other people a chance to help you the way that you have helped them,
right?
But it can be hard.
It can be hard too, because we think we don't deserve it.
Yeah.
You know, we're not worth it. Like I'm a shitty person.
Yeah.
Like if you only knew the things that I thought or whatever. And it's like, dude, I think the same things. and you know, I don't love every thought that pops in my head, you know, but that's just who we are.
Well, that's again, the premise of the movie is these two strong alpha dudes, very different experiences, fundamentally are struggling with the same transition, the same issues. And they would never guess it, and neither of them can come out and say it. It's only because circumstances sort of throw them together. But it turns out that everyone's going through something, and in fact, a lot of people are going through the exact same thing as you.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope, as it came across, I recently watched the Barbie movie. Okay, have you seen it?
I have not.
It's actually very good.
I've heard good things.
It's not what I thought at all. But as that movie for me. Yes, there's a big element of, you know, the patriarchy and feminism and all these things. But the way that it was written and the way that it was performed, the way that it was done, spoke to me too. It spoke to a lot of people, I think, that wouldn't think that it would. And my hope with MVP was the same way in the reverse, sort of, because it is a very sort of masculine story, you know, these two men. But I've had quite a bit, you know, quite a few women, and not just veterans, that connected to that and feel some of those similar things. And that was good. That was like, I mean, that was a big part of it for me. Well, that was important because that means it's relatable. These people are now, this experience is now relatable to someone who thought maybe I would never be able to fully understand or even partially understand the experience of someone going to war, you know, or playing professional sports or whatever. Like, I just don't, it's not my world. It's not my people. I don't get them. And then now they're just like, oh wait, they're you know, very, very human.
Her movie Lady Bird, I think, is one of the greatest movies of all time.
It's great. Barbie's better. It's
well, it has made like $1 billion.
So you got to see it, man. It's just the writing was. I mean, her and Noah Baumbach wrote that together. They're both brilliant. But it was how to make that IP into what they created. I think is pretty amazing. I really do.
All right. So as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about the Kaepernick thing a little bit, because one of the things I think is so interesting about it is, and maybe this is a thing that's I think a lot about from a sort of a marketing and a strategy standpoint, which I talk about in some of my books, but is the rightness of one's cause and the way one goes about it, or the best way to get people on the side of said cause, I think people often all assume are the same thing, but they're not. And so what I think is so interesting about your sort of small role in this thing that became so big, one of the probably the biggest story in sports in a generation, like people will be talking about it in a long time, is you're talking about giving notes. You're sort of like, hey, if you do it this way, the same thing, what you're saying and your cause is the same, but the way it's perceived is fundamentally different. And
by some people.
Yeah, sure. But I often wonder if you guys had that conversation before the protest had began, how differently the whole arc of the story might have even gone.
Yeah, that's very interesting. No, I mean, yeah, that was a crazy time. It was exactly a year after I got cut. So it was the preseason of 2016, and it was also Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. That was, the election was in 2 months.
Yeah.
And all of this was sort of this perfect storm of division and chaos. And it's like, all right, everybody get to your sides, and batten down the hatches and dig in, because here we go. And then, he starts sitting on the bench, and I didn't even really know about it right off the bat. I caught wind of it through social media. People just, and I understandably, a lot of people that I followed, especially at the time, were of the veteran community, and sports as well, but a lot of vets. And so there was a lot of anger and people that were pissed off and upset. And my initial reaction was very similar, just like, I'm a huge 49er fan, as I mentioned, and Kaepernick saved our team, our franchise, got us back to the Super Bowl.
Sure.
And I'm like, man, what is he, why is he doesn't stand, he's not standing for the anthem. And like, does he even understand what it means to some of us in the military? And like, just these very, sort of, I don't want to say selfish, but I guess just a very, very obtuse, reaction to this, because of just thinking of my experience and just focusing inward and just taking it all personal.
Yeah.
And so I started to read up on it a little bit, and I was getting reached out to by, all the like Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and you name it. They wanted me to come on and probably debate.
Yeah.
Why is he right? Why is he wrong? Whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. And I don't think that's going to help. And the Army Times had reached out, which nobody reads, to be fair. Not that many people. That's not true. That's not fair. But they'd reached out and said, would you write something? And I was like, I don't want to inject into this conversation, I don't think. And then they reached out again, and I kept getting, I had a lot of people reaching out, and guys I served with too, that were like, you got to say something, man. You got to like get involved. And I think they all expected me to just be like, this is why you should stand, And so I agreed. At the second time the Army reached out, or the Army Times reached out, I agreed to write an open letter. I said, if you don't edit it, if you just, you can obviously give me your feedback when I send you it. But so I wrote this thing in like an hour and a half, and it was just kind of explaining some of my experiences, what I'd been a part of in the military. I ended up, one of the main reasons I joined is I went and did some relief work in the Darfur before I joined the military. And that's what inspired me to not only serve, but become a Green Beret. And I wrote a bit about that. And, our motto, De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed. That's something I've committed to doing when I enlisted. And, I want to keep being a part of that. And the reason that these symbols mean so much to us is because our relationship with them. I carried my best friend's casket draped in an American flag. At the end of SEER school, when we were liberated, they played the anthem, and I just, I mean, it's a training, but it didn't feel like it in the moment. And so I'm very indoctrinated into these things, right? But they do mean something to me, something very special in what they stand for, what they are meant to stand for anyway, and what we fight for. And, I sent the letter to them. They said, no notes. We're publishing it in the morning. I was like, okay. So they did. And I woke up and like my voicemail was full. My email was, blown up. And a lot of sports writers had seen it and had started sharing it. So it just became quickly viral. And I remember Lance Armstrong sent me a message, strong. It was like all he wrote. And I never talked to the guy before. And it was cool. But also I was suddenly just like in a panic. Yeah. Just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I gotten into? And most of it was very positive. Yeah. But still I was like, now I'm in the middle of this thing and I'm not prepared. I'm not educated on this situation. And, I understood at a very low level, like, he was protesting. He was not standing during the anthem in protest of police brutality, racial inequality, social injustice, and these things, not the flag or the anthem specifically, which that was a narrative for a lot of people. And, I get a call from NFL Network, and I'd done some stuff with them in the past, and they're like, hey, would you come on and just sit down and have a conversation with Lindsay Rhodes, one of our anchors today, about, the letter. Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, if I'm going to go on with anybody, I'd go on with you guys because I know it's not going to be political. Yeah. And I'm like, just please protect me. Yeah. And they're like, no, this is not like, we're very proud of you and we think it's good what you did. So I'm in the green room getting ready to go on there, and Kaepernick's publicist called me and said, hey, Colin read the letter and he wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're playing the Chargers down in San Diego. Yeah. It's the final preseason game. He'd love to sit down with you before the game in the lobby of the team hotel and just, talk about it. And I'm like, is there going to be like cameras there and stuff? Yeah. She's like, no. He just genuinely wants to meet you and have a conversation. And I was like, okay. Also, I'm terrified, but I'm just like, yeah, sure. Got it. So I go to do the interview, and then the next morning I take an Uber down to San Diego because I had to fly here afterwards for something else. I go down there, I meet him in the lobby, and Colin's a big dude. He's like 6'5", he's got the afro, he's jacked, and everybody recognizes him because he's been all over the news, especially recently. And we sit down at this little coffee table, and Eric Reed joins us, another player for the 49ers who played for quite a while afterwards. And it was such a chill conversation for what was going on. I mean, it was an hour and a half or so of just these three guys, like we're sitting in a locker room just talking about life, and we laughed about stuff. And, there definitely was this element of like, man, this thing just blew up quick, and it wasn't like Colin was panicking in any way. I was panicking internally for sure. I don't know what he was feeling. I would not pretend to know what he was feeling, but he was definitely very curious and he had a lot of questions. And as we talked, he sort of asked, and I showed him some messages that I had received from vets, people that were like, hey man, like, I appreciate your letter, but I just left the tarmac in Seattle, and, one of our brothers was unloaded from the plane, in a coffin draped in the flag. Sure. And I'm standing next to his wife, and she's a mess. So I just like, anybody that disrespects our country, I can't, even though that was not Colin's intent, like that's how people were perceiving it, to your point. So I showed him that, and he was very responsive to that, and it was just like, wow, like I don't want people to feel that way. Yeah. I don't want to be responsible for those kind of feelings. And so he said, well, do you think there's another way I could protest that's not going to offend people in the military? Yeah. And I was like, no, there's nothing you can do that's not going to offend some people, but also if you, this is something I sort of realized later, but it's like, if you just all of a sudden just fall back in line and stand, and then you're going to be absolutely offending a lot of people that, were with you on this thing. And he committed. He's a very committed person. And he was just like, I know I've committed to not standing. I'm not going to. But if you think there's something else. And I said, well, to me, being alongside your teammates is important. It would be the most important thing. You're about to go out on the field with these guys, and they all think differently. Some of them are with you on this. Some of them maybe aren't. But you're putting that aside and working together towards something. And that's a great lesson the country needs to see right now. So I said, I think being alongside your teammates is the most important thing. And if you're committed to not standing, I would say taking a knee is the only thing that kind of makes logistical sense, and people take a knee to pray and propose to their future spouse. And when a player on the field's hurt, They take a knee. When I
Yeah.
go visit my best friend Brad, who passed away, and like I said, I carried this man's casket, and this guy was like my hero. When I go visit, I take a knee in front of his grave and spend a moment or several moments with him, and I think it's a respectful gesture.
Well, they're fundamentally different gestures. Sitting can feel petulant or a rejection, and kneeling is a sign of reverence or respect. But the fact that you're not doing what everyone else is doing still lodges the protest.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally. It's like a flag at half mast almost.
Yes.
I almost saw it in that way. And he agreed. And, initially when we talked, I considered kneeling with him. I thought it was something that was like, if he's willing to adjust like this, I feel like maybe I should. And we talked about that. And I was very uneasy about it and unsure. And as we were, as he was going to get on the team bus and all this, and I had to go talk to some of the Niners front office because I told him, hey, look, he's willing to take a knee, alongside the team and everything. But I told him I'd do it with him, or I'd be there with him. And they said, okay, so, we'll have you there. And then, I thought about it and I talked to him. I can't remember if I texted him or I think I must have texted Colin and said like, hey brother, I'm going to be with you next year on the field, but I think I'm going to stand if it's okay. I just don't know if I don't, it's not that I disagree with what you're doing, but it's like, it's just a different situation. It's a different.
It's not your protest either.
It's also not my protest. Yeah. That's a very good point. But it was just like, I feel differently about these symbols. And he was like, all good, see you out there or whatever. I don't remember exactly, but so you go down there, and on the sideline, game's about to start. The anthem sung by, black man in the Navy, in uniform. It's like a couple weeks before 9/11 or maybe a week before. So it's like the 9/11 remembrance game in San Diego, which is a very military town. Navy SEALs are jumping in the stadium. There's a flyover, the whole thing. And so the anthem starts, him and Eric both take a knee. I'm standing next to him with my hand on my heart. And the first thing I remember is the boo, all the boos from the crowd. And I was just like, this is gross. Like, how is that not just like incrementally more disrespectful?
Yeah.
It just was, I just didn't understand how like what he's doing is so bad, but like that during the anthem, you're going to boo like while it's being played. If you're really this patriotic and this means this much to you or whatever. And and then that sort of caught, it became something that a lot of people were doing, and Colin
now a
led.
statement that people
And what Colin stood for, or I guess knelt for, or initially sat for, whatever you want to call it, is still something that's done. I mean, in like the Premier League, there's like players
Olympics
that do this.
And, it's
wild.
crazy. No, I think we don't have to get into the whole the claims of the protest, which I think he's largely right about. But I just think it's important not only first off that you, instead of taking your offense, you listened to the person and you helped them.
He listened to though.
Well, no, I mean, but vice versa. Right. Like you, instead of being, hey, I'm so offended, you said, well, what's this person trying to say? Mm-hmm. And then he was like, then you said what you had to say, and then he listened to what you had to say, and the two of you came together. I think there's something beautiful in that. But I think just also generally, just because you're right doesn't mean that just saying what you think is the way to change people's minds, right? Like I think I just interviewed this guy Paul Kix, who wrote this great book about the civil rights movement. But we were talking about this, like what Martin Luther King and all the activists really figured out was they figured out the symbols and the ideas, and they co-opted them to reflect them back at the people who are not living up to the ideas, right? And there's a reason that the March on Washington ends at the Lincoln Monument, not some random steps of some church. Do you know what I mean? Like the symbolism of doing that in front of Lincoln was deliberate and intentional and incredibly powerful. Like you look at it and you just get the goosebumps. And so I think what I take from that is just a sort of not the main lesson, but as a lesson, which is the symbolism and the optics of what you're doing. They matter a great deal. And the tweak that you made, I think it did help a lot of people hear it that maybe wouldn't have heard it otherwise. As you said, some people are still very mad about it. But I think to go, oh, instead of, hey, this is a rejection of America, this is actually a solemn sort of protest that what this flag represents is not being lived up to.
Right.
Those are two radically different statements, even though they're coming from the same place of dissatisfaction and objection.
Right. And I want to make sure and hammer it home again and make it ultra clear that it was the change that he made or the adjustment that he made. You know what I mean?
He could have kept saying, I think what I think, I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't give a fuck what you think about it, which also is perfectly and legitimately entitled to do.
Absolutely.
And would have been courageous in and of itself. Like if you deliberately take the heat from like the entire world and the president, the future president, that's a ballsy move just in and of itself, even if you're not right. And I'm not saying he's not right, but I'm just saying like, you take the whole heat of everyone, that takes something.
Yeah, that willingness to, the humility and willingness to adjust is something that really got lost, I think, through this whole thing because it wasn't divisive, you know what I mean? And it's not going to sell ad space, you know, so we're not going to talk about that. But it's like, that's a huge thing. And I think the more people that have heard that, you know, have also listened in a different way. They're just like, okay, well, wow. And then unfortunately, it took George Floyd and this whole situation, the protest for a lot of, you know, organizations, companies to say like, you know, maybe we were wrong, but you know, that this whole like, oh, we stand with this now. I'm like, do you? Or,
sure.
Do you, or are you just trying to sell more chips?
Well, and also though, I think credit to him too is like, I'm not protesting. I'm protesting because I want people to see this and make a change. So if the way that I'm doing it is not having the effect, I'm not just going to keep doing that thing. I'm going to tweak, right?
Yeah.
Like because
my strong base isn't going to be the one to change this.
Yes.
It's going to be people that disagree with me that are going to be the ones I'm going to need to help make this change.
Yeah. If there's if they were like, hey, if you change the title of your movie, the audience would be 20x bigger, you know, or 20 times bigger. You'd be an idiot not to change the title of your movie unless it was betraying the values that the movie was about, right? And so the ability to sort of be flexible and dial it in. It's like, hey, just this slight tweak, you know, radically opens it up or radically changes the optics of it. Right. And that also just being right or having the moral high ground is not enough. You know, it's also the means of communication. And is what you're doing creating allies or is it just creating enemies? And, you know, that's a whole part of it.
What is your goal? Are you genuinely trying to create change?
Yeah, or are you just flipping a middle finger?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think it's such a great story, man. And also I think a reminder that like a little thing you do can end up becoming a huge part of your legacy, both for him and for you. Like that you were just involved in this sort of sports changing, paradigm shifting thing because you like wrote an article, you know what I mean? Yeah. And vice versa, him, the decision, he's like, I feel this way about the world. I got enough on my plate being the quarterback of having one of, 32 jobs in one,
totally.
And like I'm making millions of dollars and I got my own shit to deal with, to be like, no, I'm going to do something I'm going to say something about this thing that I feel. That's also a big part of it.
Yeah. And it's funny, like what I wrote was an open letter to Colin, but it wasn't for Colin.
Right.
It was for, making up a number, the 80% of the people kind of in the middle who, whether you lean left or right, you have some reason about you that felt like I felt, where it was just like, okay, like I totally see why he's doing what he's doing and, and all this. And yes, these things are important to me, but like, I have to understand he has a very different experience than me. He did not serve in the military. He came from a different background, totally different life. Sure. He's a person of color. I'm not. All these things that I don't understand. And if I pretend to understand, that's just, it's absolutely arrogant for me to like know, to be this all knowing in this situation. And I think that was, that was the intent. It was just to speak to other people like me. to be like, hey, look, like this is how I feel, but we'll just look at it in these terms.
Yeah.
Think of it in this way. And it's like, but then it ended up, it spoke to him too, which was cool.
Yeah, totally. Man, this was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it, brother.